covered by the manual, but I can't remember all of it. But to get the battery out, you just lift up on this tab. It kind of unlocks it, and you pull the battery out. You see the lights are now off. It is in there pretty good. So with the battery off, flashing lights, beeping from the A-Link remote here. So we're starting off the second flight. We're still in angle mode. 31 milliseconds, 32, 33 on the latency. About 17 and a half on the megabits per second for your recording quality. Right now about 48 on the throttle. RSSI is at negative 73. Just flying it around a little bit to cool it off a little bit, because I did plug the battery in for a little bit before I took off to get the cameras all synced up and whatnot. Let's do a punch over here by the chimney and just see. So that's the max thrust that it's going to produce right there. I'm adjusting a little bit to angle mode, as you can tell. It just takes time. Weather's holding out for me so far, so I should be very thankful. We had some rain really early this morning, and it's calling for more rain yet this afternoon. And then after the rain, the wind is supposed to pick up. Go into position hold again. Nope, that's not position hold. Oh, come on. I'm having troubles here. I've already forgotten where position hold is. Am I doing something wrong is the question.
I feel like it's real important to point out that it is now civil twilight. Flying after dark would invoke some restrictions, but as it is civil twilight, I know it looks dark, but the exposure settings on the camera can really throw things off. This flight is being done during civil twilight. Look it up if you don't know what it is, kids. Here we go. You could get into a pretty big debate about which of these video transmitters is the better video system. DJI versus Walksnail. But one thing that you couldn't debate until now is that the DJI O3 video transmitter is the only FPV video transmitter with 4K onboard recording. Walksnail has onboard recording, but it only records either 720p or 1080p. So, if you've wanted to get rid of your GoPro and still get high-resolution 4K recordings, the DJI O3 has been your only option. But not anymore. The Walksnail Moonlight video transmitter comes with a new camera, and as you can see, a new, thicker video transmitter. There's a reason for that. I'll tell you in a minute. 4K onboard recording, and new low light, moonlight, that's what they call it, moonlight capability. In many ways, the new video transmitter is similar to what we had before. There's a plug for power and the TX and RX lines that let it talk to the flight controller and do the OSD and other such things. Previous versions of the Caddx video transmitters had both a plug and some easily accessible solder pads for those who don't trust plugs and like to direct solder. And if we look carefully, we can kind of see inside here, there are solder pads for TX and RX, and I'm guessing there's solder pads for power and ground, although I'll open it up to find that, but they're going to be much less accessible. Like, obviously, you can't really solder to these just by coming over the top like you could with the old one. You would need to open it up. So you're going to be using a plug for this one, most likely. You're also going to notice that the antenna connectors now come out the center of the board, which is going to make them just a little bit harder to pop that antenna on. You're going to probably need to get in there with like the tip of a screwdriver and push it down, or open the damn thing up, but most people probably are not going to want to do that. And the reason for that is that they have divided the RF amplifier and the rest of the video transmitter into separate boards. And so the RF amplifier is here, and these come out the middle now. Over here we've got, oh my god, finally, after all these freaking years, an SD card slot. I can't believe it. The onboard memory of the previous VTXs, it's convenient because you don't have to take an SD card in and out, but it's also a giant pain in the ass because you have to plug in this tiny freaking plug and to plug USB, and then you have to offload your content via USB 2.0, which takes for freaking ever for 1080p, never mind 4K. Finally, we just put an SD card in our freaking video transmitter, record the data, and then pop the SD card out and put it in our computer. And that's good because 4K video is going to take a lot of space. The bit rate is 150 megabits per second, that's fantastic for 4K. Somewhere around 80, 90 megabits per second is maybe the minimum for 4K, but you can watch it down to 50 megabits per second and it won't be absolute trash. But for fast movement, like multi-rotor flying through the air, for fast movement, higher bit rate's better. We'll look at the image quality as we go into the rest of the video, of course, but 150 megabits per second is a pretty good baseline for 4K data. But it's going to take up a lot of data, and you're going to be happy that this can take up to a 256 gig SD card. You're going to want a fast one. Now we're out here at a construction site to do some test flights of this system and see how it stacks up against the O3 and what I think is one of the best Walksnail cameras, the Walksnail Pro camera. But before we put this in the air, I want to take a minute and clarify some questions that I've seen people asking about this system. I think there's a couple confusing points. We're going to get those out of the way. The first thing you need to know about this system is that there's actually three different things. The first thing is the same Walksnail Pro video transmitter that already exists. It's the latest Walksnail video transmitter with the two antennas. There's nothing new about the video transmitter. So in terms of range and performance, this is going to be exactly the same as that. We're not going to be testing that today. The second thing is a new 4K camera. And the third thing is a DVR that pairs with the video transmitter to record the signal from that 4K camera, because when you hear that this is a 4K system, you're going to wonder, does it show 4K in the goggles? No, it doesn't. It can't, because the existing goggles only have a 1080p screen, and the existing radio transmission system only sends a 720p or 1080p signal. It does not put 4K in your goggles. It only records 4K on board that DVR. The next question pertains to compatibility between the new Walksnail Moonlight system and previous Walksnail systems, and the short answer is that they are fully compatible. You can use the Moonlight 4K camera with the existing VTX. I don't see why you would do that, because that 4K is being wasted if you're not using the Moonlight DVR board, but you can do it. You can also use the Moonlight DVR board with any existing Walksnail camera if you want to have recording on board, but the Walksnail video transmitters already support recording on board, so why would you do that? You can also buy the Moonlight DVR and the Moonlight 4K camera and put them together and connect them to your existing VTX. It'll be a little bit clunky unless they ship it with like a new case for you to take the VTX out of and put it in this new Moonlight case that holds it together, but you can do that. You can retrofit that. Although at the time I'm making this, they haven't actually started selling it yet. So that's what the Moonlight system is. Hopefully that is clear, and now we can go on and we can test this out with some test flights. There's something I gotta show you in the menus of the goggles before we go out and fly. Check this out. So here we are in the settings, and if we go into camera settings, we can see all the things we could expect. We can change the ISO, we can change the white balance and the shutter speed. That's all stuff we would want. And if we go to record set, this is where we'll choose what resolution the VTX is recording at. You can see it right there, VTX Rec 1080p 60. And if I go to change that to 4K, it's not there. Where is 4K? And also, do you notice that the built-in EIS, the image stabilization, it's disabled, it's grayed out. Why is that? The reason is that you cannot record 4K 60 and use EIS when you're set on high frame rate. We have to go to standard frame rate, and when we do that, now if we go to record set, we can choose 4K 60, 4K 30, and 2.7K 60 in our recording options. But also, notice EIS is still grayed out. Why is that? And that's because the image stabilization is not available in any of the modes except for the 2.7K 60 mode. So, there are a couple limitations here you're going to want to know about before you go into this. We got a little jello. I can see a little jello. These are brand new props. That's probably not the camera's fault. Hey guys, Joshua from the future here. I sincerely apologize for this jello. I still want to show some things from this flight, so we're going to use this. I will show you more footage without jello later. The jello was not the Moonlight's fault. It was my quadcopter's fault. In fact, I smoked the capacitor later. That's not really relevant to the video. Please forgive this little indulgence though. And honestly, the footage looks pretty freaking good. I mean, Walksnail always looks pretty good in ideal lighting conditions, which is kind of what we've got here. And it'll be interesting to see how that changes as we get into more challenging lighting conditions. We're also going to compare directly to the O3 and see how they stack up. But just at first glance, this looks pretty freaking good. I do think it's interesting that the images that we're seeing here are a little bit more contrasty than what I saw in the goggles. Here is the goggle DVR from this exact same flight. Frankly, it's pretty weird to me that what I'm seeing on the Moonlight DVR is not identical, just higher resolution. And honestly, what I'm seeing here in the goggle DVR actually looks like a more pleasant and more workable image. In terms of being lower contrast, it's going to give me more latitude to play with it in post if I want to do color grading. Honestly, I just prefer it. But that's a matter of opinion, and I also know that I tend to prefer a little bit lower contrast image than most people think is desirable. So I think that the image that we're seeing here, there's nothing objectively wrong with it. Let's just get up close to these trees and try and see what kind of detail we can see in the branches to test out the 4K. And this is a place where that jello is probably hurting us a little bit. And again, indulge me, we'll look at some more footage later and have some more fair comparisons. This is the Pro camera with the same VTX. It's just the Pro camera instead of the Moonlight camera. All the settings are the same, including record set 1080p 60. Okay, so record on the device has changed from 4K to 1080p 60 because it can't record 4K, it can't do 4K at all. And my initial opinion from the Pro camera is that I just like this image more. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me. I know that I'm a little bit of a weirdo. I prefer a lower contrast image with more details in the shadows. That's not just when flying FPV. Ask Fabio how I ask him to color grade my camera images. It is not the sort of typical higher contrast, higher key Hollywood style. But the thing is, you could start with this image and you could apply a color grade to get a more contrasty image. You can always increase the contrast of the image, but once you have an image like the Moonlight is giving us with the contrast baked in, you can't go the other way. You couldn't go to a lesser contrast image and recover some of the highlights and so forth. Interestingly, that's one advantage of the DJI O3's 10-bit recording, that it gives you more latitude to do that, and the 4K it doesn't have that. Let's head on over to these trees, though, and let's do a little zoom in and see what kind of detail we get. It's got to be less than the Moonlight, right? 1080p is less than 4K. Only one way to find out. And yeah, wow, there is a massive difference in resolution. This is 1080p. It's zoomed in like 4x, right? But on the left, you've got 1080p for the Pro camera. On the right, you've got 4K from the Moonlight camera. There is a massive, massive difference. And, well, there ought to be. But, like, that didn't necessarily mean there was going to be. Now we're gonna do O3. So we'll go get the DJI goggles. And obviously this is going to be a matter of personal preference, but to me, the O3 strikes a pretty good balance between the more contrasty image of the moonlight and the ultra low contrast image that I actually tend to prefer, but like literally nobody else likes. Like if you look at the shadows as we come over towards this building, there's still some detail in the shadows. They're not completely blacked out, whereas on the moonlight they were more blacked out. The colors are really nice and natural. They don't look sort of oversaturated. It's just a lot to work with here. You certainly could use this image as is, or you could do some color grading to tweak it a little bit. Bear in mind also that the O3 has the ability to do 10-bit recording, which I don't have an example of that here, but if you're really serious about color grading, that's going to be a big, big plus and going to do a lot of flexibility. As far as the image quality and the pixel peeping goes, let's just fast forward over to the trees and see how the O3 stacks up. Boy, I don't know. I don't know if this is better than the moonlight or not. I think this is going to be pretty close. Let's freeze frame it. Ooh, I don't know. I think the moonlight might just have the edge here. I think the moonlight might just have the edge.
Especially you have the start with China, and you have a general slowness, slowing down of consumption of alcohol more generally.
1500 kV. On those motors are the Gemfan 75mm press-on props. The all-in-one flight controller, we've seen that before. Of course, we've got our little plastic cube antenna on there. It's an F411 processor, and it's got a power switchable VTX up to 200 milliwatts. The ESC on the all-in-one is rated for 5 amps with a peak or burst of 6 amps for 3 seconds. The bottom carbon fiber looks to be 2.5 millimeters thick, and motor post to motor post looks like 115 millimeters. It weighs 40.5 grams. I flew it primarily on this 450 milliamp 1S battery, but the flight video you're going to see is on the 720 milliamp 1S battery. With the 720, it weighs just about 58 grams. With the 450, it weighs just over 53.25 grams. With the TPU canopy, it weighs just about 44.5 grams. If we add on the Insta360 Go 2, it weighs 71 grams. And if we add that battery that you're going to see in the flight video, it weighs 88 grams. Note, I used a soldering iron to burn a hole in the side of my canopy because I just could not get the camera mounted in this canopy with the wire attached to its connection point on the flight controller. So I had to route it through here. And it all comes in this case, which has got Happy Model on the top. And that's it. No stickers. So as I said, the quick roll, my preference is to fly the 450 milliamp, and you get a reduced flight time, of course, but I just like the agility, and I like how it allows me to kind of just go anywhere I want to, and I feel a little bit lighter, and I feel a little bit more agile. But in this particular case, this was actually, I think, fairly late in the day, but just before dinner time. I think I got off work a touch early. And I was choosing just to burn off the battery because it was charged. I didn't want to leave it charged, so I wanted to get it back down. And I was having so much fun, I ended up over-discharging it just a touch. Plus, in the footage that you're going to see with the Insta360 Go 2, I'm flying this battery. So you get to compare the weight difference between if you add the TPU print canopy as well as the Insta360 Go 2, or maybe comparing it to a Cabbage Peanut, versus just flying it straight analog. You get to experience the difference in performance as well as flight time with the same battery. So there can be a benefit there. That's the primary reason why I'm showing you the video with the 720 milliamp battery on it, is you get that straight comparison in one flight video using the same battery in 2 different configurations. It's still good fun. I just like it a little. I just like my quads a little bit lighter, and I don't get too fussed about a flight time that's under 3 minutes. I just take a handful of batteries with me and just go fly them all. But I know that there's a split in our population. Some people want maximum flight time per battery, and other people just want to buy more batteries so they can have all the flights they want. So, wherever camp you're in, maybe there's another camp I'm missing. There you go. But, it's one of those weird things that where the Crux 3, it was 2S and 1S, but it was really most viable. I'm talking about the original one. It was most viable on 2S. It was good fun. So this is 1S. And if you like 1S, and I know why people like 1S, is one of the factors is it's lighter, it's safer, it has less inertia, so if you hit something, you're less likely to cause damage, and the batteries are cheap.
Although in my experience, I go through more 1S batteries than I do multi-cell batteries. My multi-cell batteries tend to last for quite a bit longer, and I'm not sure why that is. But at any rate, 1S has become quite popular, and so now we have a straight 1S version of the Crux 3, and it's Express LRS only. So you're going to need to get yourself a module if you like this flight and you like this quad. Because Happy Model at this time, I'm guessing by the looks of this board, Happy Model is moving away from doing SPI of any other sort. So if you want to fly a future Happy Model product that has an all-in-one board in it, we're probably going to need to have Express LRS. So yet maybe another reason to go out and make that investment into Express LRS. If you follow the channel, I'm an advocate of Express LRS. I think it's been just a great boon to the micro development. And I know people who fly larger quads are all about Express LRS too. I think if you're flying Crossfire or you've got Ghost or Tracer or something like that, I think you're in good shape. I just don't think you're going to find all-in-one boards with those protocols. So, Express LRS if you're going to be doing something microcentric or using flying a quad that has an all-in-one board in it. So this flight time is going to just keep on going and going. I need to check my notes here as I've gotten long in the tooth. I've forgotten how long the flight is. 5 minutes and 16 seconds as I look back on my notes. So we've got a little while to go yet. This was actually a really nice day. Sun's a little low. This camera doesn't show well in this sun. The camera is the Caddx Ant, which I think was a good move. I think more people approve of the Caddx Ant than they do the Runcam Nano 3. Oftentimes, one of the things that I hear about the Runcam Nano 3 is the purple hue and maybe the too much fisheye. I don't get too bothered by it, but that's one of the things I hear. I think more people are more satisfied with the Caddx Ant, but the field of view of the Caddx Ant is smaller, so you get a little bit less of a sensation of speed, a little less of a sensation of that sort of speeder racing in the forest sort of thing that we oftentimes reference, or at least those guys that have been around for a while. And we saw that video flying in the French forest. I think it was one of those things that got many of us hooked on FPV and quads. If you bind this up, I believe you have to bind it in your 250 milliwatts. I think that's just kind of where the board's at right now. You don't have to type a command because it's going to come with a Betaflight 4.3, and you'll find in your configurator that on the receiver's page there is a bind button, so you click that. You go into your Express LRS Lua script that you've got on your radio after installing your module, and you do the binding there, and you're all set to go. If you do want to run 500 megahertz on your packet side, you do have to issue some a code. I'll look that up real quick. I should have had that on my screen already, shouldn't I? I've only got a few seconds left here, but you type set space express LRS underscore rate underscore index equals 0, and then type save, hit enter. And then you just reboot your flight controller or power it on and power it off, and it'll be bound again if it was already bound. And that will allow you to run the 500 hertz on the packet rate. So there we go, end of the flight. I over discharged, like I said, just a touch, probably 10 seconds too much. So you might want to chop 10 minutes or 10 seconds off of that flight time that you see on the screen of 5:16. And here's our HD flight. So of course I've got the TPU printed canopy on there, and I've got my Insta360 Go 2. I do not have a Caddx Peanut. I probably should just order one because they are cheaper than the Go 2, I believe. And hopefully they're just as good and just as durable, because I've been actually pretty happy with my Go 2 recently. There was another firmware update that came out a couple weeks ago. Slapped that on there, and I think it's been a lot better. Initially, my experience with the Go 2 wasn't very good. Oh, there we go, that punch out. I wanted to include this particular flight for that reason as well, because when you add this much weight to the quad, it changes its performance, and I think how I recovered from that punch out kind of shows that. Because I think if I were to do all the other punch outs that I have, where I kind of pull out earlier and I'm a little bit smoother, we could be confused about that. So it's not going to be as aggressive. You can see on some of these turns that I'm getting far wider. I just don't have the authority in this powertrain in order to be able to turn much faster. So if you want to fly with a Go 2 type of camera on top with the canopy, you do need to understand that you're not going to have the same performance than you do without that extra weight. That should be known. That should be normal especially for micros. Well, micros are weight sensitive. We have to give up certain things if we want other things. And if you want to do your recording with a Go 2 or some other camera that mounts up there like the Caddx Peanut, yeah, we have to give up a little bit of performance. And when you're doing punch outs, you pretty much drive into your peak. It doesn't have any throw, even with the extra weight. It just doesn't have that sort of power. It's 1S. I haven't flown a 1S quad that had much throw in it. If you get the wind in the right direction, you might be able to produce some throw. But otherwise, it's just one of those things. Of course, this flight comes in at 4 minutes and 18 seconds, carrying this weight. If you fly slower, say you want to go out to a particular location and just get some footage, you want to do some sort of filming sort of flight, you could expect to get substantially much more, because on these hard turns, some of those hard turns are at 100% throttle, especially after the first minute or two of the flight. I know that when I'm doing 180 turns, I'm going 100% throttle, and I'm using a pitch to control my height rather than using the throttle. So that's something to consider there, is if you're wanting to fly fast like this, you need to be, you need to understand that you're going to be pushing 100% on some hard turns. I think that's, again, it's weight versus thrust. Part of your thrust is the number of cells on your battery, and that's what we have to work with. It's not a downside, just trying to make sure everybody's aware. I thought it was really good fun, and with Express LRS, recently you may have noticed on the channel, I have not, I've had a couple, I think it's 2 weeks where I maybe only posted 1 or 2 videos. And I have been converting a lot of my other quads that I fly just for fun when I'm not out flying for review purposes over to Express LRS. I've been buying the little tiny light receivers. I've been buying the Happy Model ones, as well as the JAHE MCU ones. I've been buying those 2 brands just because they've been available and they have a little square cube antenna. And I've been putting those on my other quads. Well, at this point, I think I've kind of talked myself into something previously that I have to understand that I was just lying to myself. I think Express LRS and the 500 hertz packet rate makes it feel more connected for me. When I compare equal quads and even the half a gram weight that you add, and adding, say, an EP2 type receiver, it flies like you're just pointing it in the direction you want it to go. Previously, I've said that I could tell in whoops and flying inside, but I can tell outside too. I'm going all in on Express LRS because of the feel. I feel like I can fly, just point it in the direction I go, and it goes there. Even with extra weight, I felt much more under control than I have with FrSky SPI base protocols. Again, I'm not saying anything about Ghost protocol or Crossfire or anything like that. This is just about me and micros and the Express LRS. I love how it feels in the flight. Okay, that flight has ended. No reason to look at my socks or shoes there anymore. We can head back to the desk. So the first thing I want to do is I want to put on screen that command that you have to type in to get the 500 hertz packet rate, which again is set space Express LRS _ rate _ index = 0. And then you type save, as you do with any CLI command, and you hit enter, and then your flight controller reboots. If you're already bound to your module, it doesn't have to be this one, any other module that's Express LRS and it's 2.4 gigahertz. If you're already bound, when it reboots, you should be bound again. You'll need to go into your Lua script though and change it to 500 hertz. That packet rate has to match on both of them. That's pretty straightforward. If you're binding this, again, you'll have a bind button into the Betaflight configurator. You click that, you go into your Lua script on your radio, and you hit the bind on the Express LRS Lua script, and it'll bind up. Of course, there's a host of other things you can do. Express LRS has the passphrase binding, which makes things really, really simple. I've been using passphrase binding on all my others. One of the things that concerned me about this overall quad is I actually found it to be really durable. But first, up here, I want to put kind of my VTX test, where I actually circle the house and I pass through there. If you follow the channel closely, you know that I don't fly out front very often. And that's mainly because a good many times I just can't get good enough video. Plus, it's just safer to be in the backyard. I don't have to worry about one of the kids ducking out front on me or anything. So anyways, I thought at 200 milliwatts, this all-in-one board did really well as far as the clarity in going around the front of my house. Yes, it's analog, so the guys that are used to flying DJI or Caddx Vistas are probably going, no, it's terrible. Well, for analog and micros, this is where we're at still. And then I went over to my neighbor's property, and then we go down below grade, which is below ground level. So we're actually got some ground in our way, and I go down to that little tree creek area, and then I hover behind a cement footer over behind their yard. And, at 200 milliwatts, usually I have to have at least 350 in order to do those things and have much clarity, and I thought it performed very well. Of course, there's a variable of that. I would have to acknowledge that. I've worked with a number of different people when they're trying to solve video problems. One of the variables is your environment, humidity, vegetation, things that are blocking you between there. Water is great at blocking our signal. Also, your module and what you're using in your antennas. So if you're, I'm using the Orca goggles with the Immersion RC module, as well as one Lumineer AXI antenna and one True RC antenna. And I can link those if you want those, but that's my setup. That's how it works. Even if you had my setup in your space, you might not get the same sort of video reception again because environment variables. Maybe your house is close to a cell tower or other sort of interference. Who knows? So anyways, I thought that was pretty impressive. I'll also put some other general flying up there and some crashing. I smoked the top of the house twice. I'll put those crashes first. I just forgot what I was flying and hit the throttle, and it didn't have what I was expecting for a throttle punch. And I just ended up smoking the house, which I guess, I mean, you can tell my props are banged up. And look at this one over here. That's ridiculous. Yeah, it's kind of bowed up. Anyway, so as far as its durability goes, I have no complaints. I didn't crash it nearly as much with this canopy as well as the my HD camera in there. I didn't crash that nearly as often. One of my concerns about flying it with this canopy and the extra weight is the antenna, the Express LRS antenna on the board. There's a little notch or cutout here. Hopefully you can see that, but it's not big enough. You actually, even with, I should point out, there's a UFL down here, so if you wanted to change the whip antenna to something else, you can do that. There's a UFL connector right down there on the board. And this kind of sits on top of that UFL connector, and then we have that little cutout, but it still comes in contact with that antenna. So one of the things I should caution you about is if you have a bunch of crashes or maybe one hard bad crash, one bad luck crash, you could end up damaging that antenna with this canopy on top. Of course, you can remedy that yourself by just trying to maybe take away more of this material or put something underneath this to prop it up more off the board so that it doesn't come in contact with the square antenna that's on the board. I do think this is relatively well designed though, and wasn't terrible heavy. I really don't have any complaints. I think this was pretty wise to keep this from moving around because once you get a camera in there, this area becomes pretty stiff. And I think this was key to it. And it's not, I don't think it's 100% infill, so it's not all that heavy. And of course, I burned mine so that I could get my wire through there. I have seen one other, I think it was, I forget his name, is a Team Pilot, a Happy Model. He was able to get his camera mounted up without, you know, as far as I could tell from the video and the pictures, he was able to get his camera mounted up without making this modification. I couldn't, and I think this is probably better anyways, because then the tension on your wire just won't be there. It gives you more slack. So, and that's just, I just took a soldering iron, warmed it up, just kind of reamed out a little hole. If you don't like that, you don't have to do that, but that's what I did in order to remedy the issue. There's, of course, other ways you could go about it. Maybe you cut a slot in here, the wires just kind of route up through there, whatever you want to do, but just kind of sharing my experience. The canopy is really durable. I don't have any issues with that. I think if I find complaints, that's kind of what you do in reviews, right? So I'm concerned about the antenna and that canopy. I should move that over there because I'm probably flying stuff over there, but that canopy and that antenna, so you need to make an adjustment there. There's also some excess motor wire we could get rid of if you were to want to take off a little bit of extra weight. I'm not sure if it's worth it, but you know, if you find you want to venture down that road, that's one to go with. It does look like we have, I'll just zoom in on this. I think this is solid pin PH20 connector, but I'm having troubles being definitive about that. I thought Happy Model was using solid pin, but I just can't quite see that. I'll have to get my magnifying glass out. But that's a good look at the connector down there. Of course, I've talked about PH20 connectors. If they're rolled pins, they tend to wear down over time and you got to change them out. My understanding is Nubidrone has stayed with rolled pins because solid pins actually cause battery problems. I don't know if that's a fact or not. I'm just passing on that information. So if you're out there flying solid pin connectors and you're finding your batteries are dying, let me know. That way I can maybe confirm that myself. I fly so many different things, it's hard for me to blame like a rolled pin versus a solid pin versus a battery issue on any one thing. The pad down here is just regular foam. It's not a huge deal because the rubber band does an adequate job of holding on to the battery. They do give you the extra rubber bands in the bag, but these are your garden variety office sort of rubber bands. So if you need to get a new one, you certainly can. Maybe you want to have a different color. And I just went with the kind of the cross shape. I suppose you could do something else. Maybe you could even just use a strap. Take a strap underneath there, a real small light strap. The rubber band doesn't bother me that much though. It's not pretty to look at, so maybe a black rubber band would have been a nicer touch. Okay. And then we've got the little foam pad, which keeps the battery off our screw heads. And they are Phillips screws. You know, I always prefer to have the same screw all over the place because it always makes working on things easier. But we didn't in this particular case. And then we have our motor wire motor connectors here still on the board. So if you needed to swap out a motor for some reason, pretty straight, simple. And they did use some of my favorite tape that I call Emax tape, but I'm sure it has a different name. It's always linked down in the video description. I think I've listed it twice, one from Emax and maybe one from Banggood, so depending upon your location you can find it. This tape is just a bit wider than what I use, but it does the job. I don't really have any complaints. The frame does have motor protection out here in the corners. I think this is exactly the same frame as the Crux 3 original, isn't it? I forget. And my Crux 3 is back behind the shelf. I should just grab it, but at any rate, yeah, it's real flexible, but it's 1S. You know, it's pretty hollow here in the center, so it's not surprising because you're not really bending the arms. You're flexing all these points here in the center where it's real thin. So I didn't, in flight, I don't think it makes any dang difference. But if that's important to you, it's something you should know. We got 4 screws on all the motors. That's a good thing, holding on to the motors. Some people go with 2, some people go with 3. Got 4. I guess if you want to eliminate one and cut some more weight there, it's another opportunity to cut some weight. Shorten your motor wires, maybe drop a screw or 2 on each motor. Now you might get 2 grams possibly, maybe only 1.25 grams. It gives you an opportunity to save some extra weight. Of course, you can put some weight back on and get some better reception possibly by adding a small circular polarized antenna. Of course, I would encourage you to get a light one. ORT has also got some antennas that are very light. They are linear antennas, but they're kind of improved linear antennas than what we see the stock coming on most things. This came with the zip tie on it, but this zip tie is mine because I had to cut it in order to get the other canopy on. So when you get yours, you will find it has a zip tie. Mine happened to be black, and mount things up to switch things around. You're gonna have to cut yours too. Yeah, it's good fun. Express LRS, I think for me, pushes it up to the next level. I think the other question is, do you buy this one? Or do you buy the Nanohawk X? I think that question gets real easy because the Nanohawk X is FrSky SPI, so if you don't have Express LRS, that kind of eliminates this as a possibility. I suppose later on we could see a different edition, but as of right now, it's Express LRS only. So if you don't have Express LRS, then you're probably going to want to go the Nanohawk X route. But if you have Express LRS,
We are issuing Hong Kong dollar stablecoins today. We're in a sandbox for tokenized bank deposits in Hong Kong. We're effectively issuing tokens related to trade finance in Singapore. So it's all on the table, but we're always going to tie it back to what our clients want and need. Because if we don't get that one right, the rest doesn't matter.
The market capitalization of both type of instruments, crypto and digital assets, are both very low. Stablecoins today have $20 billion of flows a day. It's less than 1% of the flows of the payment system in the world. But because they have the ability to be very helpful in use cases, particularly in retail to begin with, but then potentially on the wholesale side, I think we will see a lot more of them.
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg Television?
That's a great question.
It's a very good question.
Interesting question. Good question. Great question. I so appreciate that question. You simply ask interesting questions.
Bloomberg Television. Top experts with questions.
Bringing you up to the minute news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Haslin Amin in Bangkok. This is Bloomberg.
Yes, it is true a weaker dollar boosts exports. However, we have in the United States has 39 trillion of debt on its way to 40 trillion plus. And when you have that much debt, I think stability of the currency probably trumps exports. And so I actually think the U.S. is going to want to see a stable dollar.
Goldman Sachs Vice Chairman and, of course, former Dallas Fed President Robert Kaplan there giving his view that stability in the dollar would serve the United States better than a weaker dollar. Let's get the thoughts of our Markets Live Executive Editor, Mark Cudmore, who joins us now. Mark, good morning to you. So how much new information do you think there is in what President Trump had to say about his comfort level on a weaker dollar?
Not much. It's hit a market that was vulnerable already. We've been talking a lot on the show recently and over the longer period of time that, dollar is in a structural downtrend that started at the start of last year. We kind of paused a bit in the second half. We talked a lot about how we expected 2026 to be another year of depreciation for the dollar. It obviously was particularly weak in the wake of those dollar-yen rate checks last week. And then suddenly we got this comment which kind of encouraged a market that was vulnerable. But really, there's almost no informational value, and which should be probably completely discounted. What I mean by that is Trump's, welcomeness to a softer dollar is not new. He's constantly expressed that. And as Robert Kaplan outlined, Trump wants to remake the U.S. as an industrial powerhouse, but in reality, its financial services is power, and so therefore that trumps the kind of export spaces as Robert Kaplan outlined. But that's not how Trump sees it. So this isn't a new view from Trump. And I think that in context of the latest dollar weakness is with the context that Trump's policy has been slightly undermined. He had to backtrack on Greenland. He's kind of slightly de-escalated when it comes to Minneapolis. He threatened Canada with tariffs that was kind of ignored. He threatened Korea on tariffs and the stock market boomed. So in the context that his comments are being slightly undermined, why are we suddenly putting so much weight in him reiterating an old view? I don't see why. So for me, I am bearish the dollar structurally, but I don't think this is a reason to sell the dollar.
Mark, there's so much going on. My head is spinning. I'm trying to get a handle on kind of where's north. Are we comfortable with the level of risk in these markets? How over our skis are we? How unbalanced do you think everything is out there?
I'm really struggling with this, Guy, and the kind of the trader inside me, the trader background of me is a little bit nervous by the pace of gains. We talked a little bit on the show yesterday about how, we think that the macro backdrop is very supportive for global investors. We think the rest of the world continues to outperform the US, and we think that's a dynamic of leg. So everything that's happening makes fundamental sense. But just really the pace of gains in many assets, it just is unsustainable and it's crazy. But what's going to turn it around? I'm not expecting the FOMC to be the event. I'm not expecting earnings to be the event. So basically, I'm a little bit nervous here as a trader, and I think it's very hard in short-term moves. But as an investor, I wouldn't panic yet. It's not a reason to suddenly go, this is over the skis just yet. At some point, that will come.
Was any of your panic assuaged, Mark, by the auction, the 40-year auction in Japan?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question, because I thought that was going to be one of the main catalysts this week for risk, and actually that went really well, and so that's a real positive. So it seems like we're not going to attack the bond market this week. If we are looking for a vulnerability in the kind of whole infrastructure, something that kind of flows through various asset classes, it would be if the bond market comes under attack again. But in fact, the bond market's been incredibly stable over the past few days.
Okay, we're seeing that again today with yields down across the curve in Japan. Bloomberg Markets Live Executive Editor Mark Cudmore. Mark, thank you. Remember, of course, you can get up-to-date analysis and insight from Mark and the rest of the fantastic team. Just go to MLive Go on your terminal. Let's bring Chloe Melling now with some stocks to watch. I suspect maybe ASML is on the list, Chloe.
It absolutely is. Good morning, Tom. It could be a very good day for ASML. Fourth quarter bookings were nearly double what analysts had expected, and the company also announced a big 12 billion euro buyback and also announced some job cuts to streamline, to simplify those operations. And so this could really lift the shares this morning after what has been already a very impressive rally in that stock. And the CEO has also said that clients were becoming more and more optimistic about the sustainability of this AI demand, which of course explained this record order intake and also bodes really well for the coming quarters for the company. Moving on to LVMH, and we could see a little bit of weakness there after sales came in below expectations. The CEO said the company was operating in quite a difficult environment, and that means that 2026 will not necessarily be straightforward. And so this could come in as a bit of a disappointment, especially given that Burberry and Richemont in that luxury sector have actually provided quite upbeat outlooks. And so we could see LVMH shares continue to outperform some of those peers, as they have been, as we can see here, over the last few months. And finally, miners are always and still in focus. Gold has just hit another record as investors continue to rush to safe haven assets, continue to flee sovereign bonds and currencies. And of course, this precious metals rally is great news for all of those companies, for those gold miners. But as we can see, they've already been having a fantastic year. So we'll see how much more they can really extend those gains.
Chloe, thank you very much. Chloe Nelly from our equities team. The European Open just minutes away then. AEX futures up by 1.4%, CAC futures down by 0.5%. And that's the two big corporate stories in the markets fully reflected
I think
there.
it's such a fascinating day today. I really want to see if we can get an answer, at least if not by the end of today, then by the end of this week, in terms of whether we're really getting a split from the software versus hardware. We've seen that, of course, reflected in terms of stocks, but are we seeing continued questions around the capex spent from the hyperscalers and whether or not they're able to ship their AI products at the same time when SK Hynix and ASML have both confirmed in the session today that at least in the short to medium term, the strength and the sustainability is there. And at what point does that gap close? So we may have some more answers by the end of this week.
What I'm surprised about is the stock market's roaring, risk is on, everybody's feeling good, yet LVMH is not selling handbags, not selling luxury goods.
They are selling gold, but not enough to compensate for the lack of handbags being sold. But yeah, that tells you something about where people find safety to put their money right now.
Does that imply, and maybe I'm taking this too far, does that imply that people are not confident in this stock market rally?
And you'd have thought with the K that the top of the K might be spending on that kind of stuff.
But are they not? Are they being more cautious because they worry about what they see in front of them and the kind of the crazy market moves that we're getting?
The different units of the business are interesting, to your point. So they're buying jewellery, they're buying watches, a little bit more discerning, even at the top end of the K. But of course, luxury has its own
there's intrinsic value with some of that stuff. To Anna's point, kind of what happens, is my gold watch worth more
than your handbag?
Well, it's nice.
Possibly. Coming up on the programme, we will bring you the market open Wednesday the 28th of January, AEX versus CAC this morning. This is Bloomberg.
U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers jobs day like Bloomberg. From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg. Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
Why is it that NFTs have not recovered in the same way that, say, Bitcoin has?
Bloomberg is covering all things crypto.
It's a pretty spectacular story.
The people.
This is the future. This is the 21st century economy.
The transactions.
It snapped up nearly $1 billion of Bitcoin.
And the technology.
We need to build a digital Fort Knox.
That gives people financial freedom, and that's a wonderful thing.
That's extraordinary.
We ride the wave that is Bitcoin.
Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays only on Bloomberg.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Alam, only on Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sherrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stradwell here in Sydney where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering.
We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
Get your fixed income fix. Watch Bloomberg Real Yield around the world right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Good morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden in London, and these are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia. We'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
To be honest, the back end of yesterday's US session wasn't that exciting, so I've binned that chart and we've moved on to this chart, and we're going to show you what is happening with Nasdaq futures right now. This is the ASML effect. It is a huge day for tech on both sides, on all sides of the globe. Does the globe have a side? But everywhere, tech is in focus. In Asia, in Europe, and in America a little bit later on. That's ASML when it posts its numbers there. That is lifting Nasdaq futures stateside as a precursor to maybe what we see a little bit later on as big tech starts to report on.
Yeah, the Dutch are stealing the limelight, at least for now, guys. So you're looking at futures pointing to build on the gains, around 0.4% that were notched up by European stocks yesterday. So across the benchmark, Stocks 50 futures looking to add 0.3%. But here is the split. It is France versus the Netherlands. It is ASML. Expect the semiconductor names to get a significant lift on the back of that massive sales number and orders number for the fourth quarter from ASML, pointing higher than the AEX by 1.4%. On the downside, LVMH a drag. Let's see how that affects the broader luxury space. The CAC rank called lower by 47 points.
Let's tell you a bit more about some of the stocks in focus. Tommy alluded to some of these already. So ASML certainly will be one that we'll be watching. We'll watch how that ripples through into other semiconductor names, though, in Europe. That would be interesting to see how widespread is the positivity. We spoke to the CEO. He was very positive about the business, certainly the clarity that they've got from some of the big spenders on their kits and indeed the hyperscalers at the end of that supply chain. So that's interesting. They're also cutting jobs. LVMH in focus. We talked about the areas of weakness around fashion and the handbag side of things. There is some more strength in jewellery, but maybe that's not enough to offset. And Volvo Trucks in focus as well. A slightly more positive line coming through them. There's slight improvement in some markets recently, stabilisation in several markets. An interesting line to watch that.
Okay, here we go. ASML versus CAC Quarante. Are we going to see how big is the spread? How big is the outperformance we get from the Dutch market? How big is the underperformance we see out of the CAC Quarante on LVMH? And maybe that spreads through into the rest of the luxury space. At the moment, we have to contend with what is happening with the FTSE 100. That's the commodity trade. Are we going to see gold represented there as being a positive story? Are we going to see some of the basic resources stocks going higher? Stock 600 is down. But we're waiting. We're waiting to see how ASML opens this morning. The AEX might take a few moments to get going, but the CAC has already got going, and it is down by 0.7
Holy
of
shit.
1%. So weakness in France this morning on the luxury front. Is that going to affect other markets? Maybe Switzerland could be affected by that as well. But let's see how the AEX opens. It could take a little while, I suspect, to get the Dutch market going this morning. ASML is a huge part of it. Are other chip stocks going to be moving as well on the upside? It looks like we're probably going to be seeing some upside performance coming through from that space. But I've got to wait. The moment has not yet arrived when we see how big a day the AEX is going to have and what that is going to mean. But Nasdaq futures sharply higher. AEX futures sharply higher. Tom.
Tech as a sector gaining 0.4%. Basic resources, to your point, around the FTSE 100 gaining 1%. That's top of the list right now. We'll see how that changes on the tech story as we get the print. ASML is currently halted, it looks like. So brace yourself for a big pop higher for that stock. Energy, of course, gaining 0.8% as well. LVMH tumbling around 6%. So that's the drag. Consumer as a sector, the biggest loser, down 1.7%.
Yes, and it does seem as if the LVMH story is rippling through others in the sector. So that stock down by 4%. Christian Dior also down by over 4%. Kering down 3%. Moncler down 3%. Burberry also weaker. Richemont not so bad. And we'd already heard from them that they, with a slight more leaning towards the jewellery side, maybe a bit more cushioned from some of the trends we're seeing. But that's the luxury side of things, and consumer products and services, into which luxury falls, is the weakest performing sector this morning here for resources and energy doing better than technology so far today. But to your point, Tom, we have not got ASML just yet because it is still halted. But the rest of the tech sector, a lot of it's at least going higher.
What is interesting is pharma's also getting hit pretty hard this morning. So some of those names definitely pointing on the downside. So LVMH down by 4.2, but Roche, Novo, Novartis, Astra are all down pretty sharply as well today. So the pharma trade is under pressure, but I'm waiting. Infineon has just opened. Infineon's just opened 6% higher.
Yeah.
So the chip story in Europe is getting a positive read across from what we're seeing with ASML. It's a tale of two companies today, and the ripple effect that they're causing in the European space.
Yeah, Infineon up 6.6%. ST Micro over in the CAC current, of course, up close to 6% as well. ASM International over in the Netherlands up 3.9%. Again, ASML shares halted in Amsterdam after that record quarter. The moment we get the print, we'll bring that to you, of course. But we can broaden out the conversation now.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's bring into the conversation Beata Manthi, head of European equity strategy over at Citi, and the perfect voice to have with us this morning as we're wrestling with a lot of things in equity land. Beata, thank you very much for being with us. Let's start with the strength that we're seeing in European tech today. You, not long ago, last week, was it, downgraded overall expectations for European stock, but you still see some upside this year. Where does tech fit into that? Because it does seem as if Europe has a part to play in the phase of tech strength we're in right now.
Absolutely. So what we've done a week ago, we've changed our preference within the rest of the world. So we continue to see the diversification trade being strong this year. But what is happening in the euro-dollar and the tariff risks re-emerging, and you can see from the consumer stocks today, the demand, the international demand is still not there. That all puts a crack in the entire delivery of EPS in Europe this year. So last year was easy. Investors were very bearish, valuations were low, the market was pricing EPS contraction, right? Well, we knew the EPS was going to be under pressure, but nothing what the market was pricing in this year. Of course, last year the market has re-rated ahead of this delivery. Analysts have had 11% expectation for this year for EPS. We have 8%, still very robust.
Okay.
We haven't changed any assumptions.
Yes.
We continue to have the same target. It was, as of December, was 11% upside. It's probably 5-6 now, so that hasn't changed. But I think what is happening geopolitically around the world really re-emphasizes the domestic trade in Europe, that potential is going even stronger, and fiscal delivery issuance. But the international story, and this is where the broadening was based on, that has cracks. And euro-dollar in the near term could be a problem.
Okay, there's a lot in there, Beata. You didn't mention tech, but that's fine.
I will.
No, we'll get back to tech then. Let's linger on the broader theme, because it seemed as if the time when you downgraded stocks was when we got the tariffs threat. Then the threat was removed, but it sounds to me like you were downgrading stocks for other reasons. It wasn't just that President Trump was threatening tariffs over.
It wasn't about the tariffs. It wasn't about the tariffs.
So you're not tempted to upgrade now as a result?
No, it was never about the tariffs. It was really about the new world order, what happens to the currency, what happens to the international trade. And we re-emphasize actually for the domestic story. So perhaps investors have to be selective, just like they've been last year. So Europe has done very well, but through a narrow set of sectors and stocks, right? It was domestic story, and the international story has been under pressure. This year probably it won't be under so much pressure, and we see from tech today that's an international story.
Yeah.
Sales are amazing. AI trade is well and alive, and we see confirmation of that from around the world. So Korea earlier on, Taiwan, right? It's all happening from the US probably, where we are going to have very positive reporting season. So we are still very bullish AI, but we also think that this AI trade is broadening. It has already broadened to EM last year, so EM is our top pick globally. Europe is only neutral, so we've downgraded the preference basically, swapping it with Japan. But going forward, really, the investors' focus should be on delivery. Tech is delivering, right?
Well, tech is delivering. We're seeing that reflected in the SML share price right now. So popping 6.5% to a record. This is a market cap of above 500 billion right now. So it's by a long stretch the most valuable company in Europe. We won't get to name specific companies, but does European tech have a bigger role to play in the AI theme this year?
We think Europe overall has a bigger role to play, because we think it's not only broadening, but investors' focus is starting to shift to to the question, is it working? So from enablers to adopters, this is one of our big themes. Of course, enablers and what we are seeing in the European data today, that's a catch-up trade, right?
Yeah.
And
But adopters, that could be finance, banks.
that is a very broad base of sectors.
Okay.
And for us, physical AI, that's of course big focus. You focus on in that space on industrials, big sector in Europe.
That's robots.
Yes, that's
Very exciting by robots.
That's robots. But you know, industrials are at the crossroads of where the AI is going and where the money is coming from Europe, right? So the fiscal stimulus going a lot into that sector.
Do they have to be domestically focused industrials that are adopting AI? Because you pointed to your concern about the internationally exposed European companies.
So the industrial space, yes, for the first question.
Okay.
Now there will be names that we have in our basket of stocks for the fiscal delivery that will benefit a lot from the fiscal. They will be receiving orders. They are already receiving orders, but they also have international exposure, right? So it's a bit of a mixed bag. However, the domestic story, of course, have been overwhelming on their performance. So industrials, basic resources, and banks, our top picks in terms of sectors for Europe. Within tech, we are bullish semis, but software not as constructive as in semis. Let's put it this way.
Can I just come back to this idea that the euro is a negative for Europe? Because I don't really understand it. Because if I'm a US investor, like the FTSE 100, up 2.82% so far this year. In dollars, we're up by 5%. I'm a US investor. I'm looking at Europe. Looks great. Asia looks better, maybe, in terms of the performance we've seen so far this year. So why is the euro negative? I get it from a kind of bottom-up perspective, but from a top-down, why is that the case?
You're right. From top down, as I said, what is happening is only reinforcing the case for diversification. Because if you're a US dollar investor and you think your currency is going to weaken, of course you're searching opportunities outside.
Is it
right?
going to?
So that's going to continue. Our models point to, and this is the feedback I get from the investors, that at the top of everybody's minds are the emerging markets right now, right? This is where everybody is focused. Europe is secondary, but more selective. So investors see upside in the domestic story. Of course, euro strength helps the domestic story, but really it's not very helpful for the international story. That's all. Europe has done very well in this type of environment last year, right?
So why would I put money to why would I put any money to work in Europe if I think that Asia is going to outperform? Asia has all the pieces in the puzzle. So what's the spread going to be?
Well, look, within the Asia or emerging markets, our top recommendations are for Korea, for Taiwan, and also for South Africa, because that's the gold trade, right?
Okay.
But we are going to EM, investors are very concentrated in AI. Of course, it's doing great now, but we know it could be a volatile year as investors move from one winner to another winner, and that shift produces volatility. So our view is you want to diversify. You don't want to have all your money in AI. It is a very important thing, but there are other things going on. You just follow the money. European governments are spending a lot of money on fiscal, right? Why not putting a bit of money into that?
And recently I was reading that the MDAX is not keeping up with the DAX in terms of factoring in the benefits that fiscal spend brings. Is there a smaller cap story? We've seen actually that since the start of this year, there was a smaller cap story in the States playing out. Is there a smaller cap story here? Because that's more domestic.
Absolutely. That's been our top pick at the start of last year. It has fizzled out a bit towards the end of last year because the international story, large caps have started to outperform. But when I look at the earnings prospects for this year, they are double of DAX, or earnings prospects for mid caps in Europe, broader Europe, double than
Why is
for
that
the
not
large
being
caps.
priced? Because the Germans haven't spent as quickly as we thought they were going to. Does it all come through this year?
I don't know. It depends what you were expecting. Perhaps the expectations were too high, right? It was the issuance has the budget has been only approved in September. The issuance has only started in October. Actually, what they are doing is not bad. And when you look at the data of industrial production, factory orders, domestic factory orders, they are beating expectations and picking up. But we are only starting that process now. Fiscal is only starting to be expansionary this year, and EPS has been under pressure last year, right? So
Beata, what do you do with the UK? A guy mentioned in dollar terms the upside for the FTSE 100 about 5% year to date. What do you do with the UK equities?
So
they're very cheap. Even
Be
after the big game.
Be selective. That nothing is cheap
Yeah.
anymore versus its own
Yeah.
history, right? They are cheap on in relative sense versus the other regions. So what we like within the UK, basic resources is one of our top picks. Banks, of course, and industrials, defense stocks, right? The UK, the FTSE 100 is the highest share of defense stocks as percent of market cap out of any other
Defense, not defensives.
defense. Actually, defensives, it's 50%. That's a headwind if you want cyclicality, if the market wants cyclicality. But defense is almost 10% now.
Is dollar revenue an issue?
So it is the most international exposed market in the world, right? 80% comes from abroad. So depends what happens to the euro pound going forward. That's definitely a big driver.
Euro pound, not
Sorry, pound dollar. Pound dollar.
yeah.
Too many crosses.
But it feels like currency. Is this a fundamental market or is this a kind of macro market?
It's a bit of both. We've had very macro and geopolitical market at the start of the year. That's going to continue. We will see more of that playing out throughout the year. But because valuations are so high, the focus has to be on fundamentals delivery. This is why you see the reaction you see the reporting season, right, to the numbers. So that's all eyes on earnings, definitely.
I'm going to sound like a broken record. Do your homework. Seems to be the story. Beata, thank you very much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Nice to see you. Beata Manthi, Head of European Equity Strategy, joining us from Sydney. The core looks like this in Europe. There you go. Farmers down, luxury's down, defence is down, tech is up. SML is up by 6%. Sun is up by a little bit. Some of the staples are actually moving sideways today. Nestle's not having a bad session. Let's look at the individual moves. I think we're going to start with the chip space. Chloe's here with more.
Good morning, Guy. Indeed, it's a great day for the chip sector here in Europe after ASML reported record fourth quarter bookings. They came in almost a double what analysts had expected, and the company also shared quite an upbeat outlook because customers keep spending money on AI, and therefore there is growing demand for ASML's tools, and we are up almost 6% on the back of those really positive results, really positive outlook for ASML, and is driving up the rest of that sector, and in particular, STMicro is up here about 4.6% this morning, but we are green across the screen there for that chip sector. Moving on to the luxury sector, where we are red across the screen this time, and that is after LVMH dragged down the rest of that sector. So LVMH reported sales below expectations, and the CEO said that 2026 will be a little bit difficult, that it was a difficult operating environment for the company. And so after we saw quite a lot of investor optimism in that luxury industry at the start of the earnings season, we're seeing that reverse now, and we're seeing quite a lot of red there across the screen. Christian Dior is down, Kering down, Burberry down, all in the red today. And moving on, but staying within that same luxury sector, but focusing in on a smaller player, and Ferragamo is also down about 5%. It also reported earnings after the close last night, and analysts said that its wholesale segment was particularly weak, and so sales disappointed as well there. So we are really seeing weakness across their luxury sector. And finally, let's end on miners. We are used to seeing them in the green. They are still in the green today after gold hit another record as investors continue to rush towards safe haven assets. And so we are seeing that reflected in some positive movements for all of those miners, and Anglo American in particular up about 2.6% this morning.
Chloe, thank you very much. Chloe Nelly with the latest on those movers. Let's just throw into the mix what we're seeing on healthcare. Chloe was talking about luxury names going lower. Well, the second worst performing sector is healthcare, and that stood out to us as interesting, so we're having a bit of a deep dive into that. But this is the extent to which we're seeing some weakness coming through on these healthcare names. Suggestions from the team so far: there's an FX effect perhaps of the weaker dollar. If you're a dollar earner, dollar revenue, it could be an area of concern. US politics could be playing in here as well. It was interesting. I was wondering whether it was just a move out of a defensive sector into a more risk-on technology sector, but actually, sector by sector, we're split half and half. So even though the tech theme is so strong this morning, we're half and half positive and negative across European equities.
We're going to get more context on that.
And the top 600 is entirely flat.
Yes,
Can I just,
it's a reminder, isn't it?
News.
Can I just, is it a dollar translation story? These guys, the US farm market is the biggest farm market in the world by a country mile.
Yes, exactly. That's what I'm saying. So one of the suggestions being their dollar revenue,
Is that,
and that weighs on the sector.
Well, it's a reminder with our conversation with Beata Manthi, isn't it? In terms of her view is, and she zeroed in on euro strength and dollar weakness and what that means for the earnings story for European corporates, even as she sees that domestic strength story. On tech, then, we're going to get more details in terms of ASML. Here's the tease for you. Coming up, smoking hot chips. They don't actually make the chips, of course, but they make the equipment that goes into making the chips of those fabs. Record fourth quarter orders at ASML as the AI boom spurs demand at Europe's most valuable company. We'll bring you the context, the analysis. That's coming up. This is Bloomberg.
Tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
We gotta talk crypto.
From the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead.
What's the conversation around your company?
Bringing you insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy.
Planning very big games.
A new level of premium.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The floodgates of innovation are going to open up.
You can't fake passion. You either are or you aren't.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute geopolitical news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Stephen Engel at Japan's Akasaka Palace in Tokyo, and this is Bloomberg.
What is going to be the consequence for U.S. markets?
We are seeing bullish gains across European equity markets.
Take a look at how we're faring when it comes to Asian markets.
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Breisfeld.
And I'm Romain Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Good morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Welcome back to the opening trade. Watch Bloomberg Tech.
This is the Asia Trade.
This is Wall Street Week. Welcome to Balance of Power.
This is Bloomberg Television.
The trading day is about to start.
And you're already looking for that edge.
The opening trade brings you everything you need to know as markets open across Europe.
Let's talk about significant risk transfers to find space in their balance sheet.
Hedging some of that risk.
You could look at it the other way. Obviously, this stuff is risk weighted.
I would much rather be long than be short.
We're in a kind of a sweet spot.
Very, very strong alignment.
3 revolutions in one.
I'm Guy Johnson.
I'm Anna Edwards.
And I'm Tom McKenzie.
This is your opening trade.
Every trading day, only on Bloomberg.
Bringing you the world's business and financial news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Michael McKee at Mount Everest. And this is Bloomberg.
Welcome back to watching the opening trade. We're 20 minutes into the session. If you are invested in the chip sector, you're having a good morning. If you're invested in the luxury sector, you are not having a good morning. That is basically the skinny on what is happening in these markets. There's a gold trade out there as well, but that's basically the thing.
The skinny. I like that guy. Yeah, the losses, in fact, for LVMH are bigger than the gains for ASML right now. But, of course, the market cap is significantly more in the favour of ASML, above 500 billion. The gain's now 5.3% for that stock, having been higher at 7% at the start of the opening trade. ASML shares then surging, of course, after the Dutch semiconductor equipment maker reported record bookings for the fourth quarter, and a new share buyback program. In the past hour, ASML has also announced plans to slash around 1,700 jobs. Let's bring in Bloomberg's Charlotte Hughes Morgan, joining us out of Amsterdam. Charlotte, what really stood out from you, from what we've heard from the CEO and from these numbers, in terms of how this company is looking forward?
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I mean, that booking number smashed through all the expectations that we were seeing coming in to this quarter. And expectations were high. I mean, ASML's share price was already up around 32% since the start of this year. But that 13.2 billion euros in booking really signals just how strong the demand is for ASML's chip-making machines. And remember, ASML is the only company capable of making this cutting-edge lithography machines that produce the sophisticated chips that are powering the AI boom that we're seeing. And so what is driving this record number? It's sustained demand for artificial intelligence. And ASML CEO saying in the statement, look, our main customers, so that's all the major chip makers, TSMC, Intel, Samsung, are really positive about the medium-term market perspective here for AI. They are digging in, they are investing in increasing their AI capacity. You know, we've seen stories about billions poured into data centers and other AI infrastructure, and that's really translating into strong bookings for ASML. And they expect this to continue throughout 2026. Again, topped estimates, and they expect sales to continue
Hello,
growing,
this is
and
Awesome
demand for
People.
their most
So,
sophisticated
in today's
machines,
video, we're going to look at the Mobile S704.
is driving this as particularly strong. So that AI demand story is sustainable, I think, is the message from ASML's leadership today.
So, Charlotte, is it a surprise that the company has also announced job cuts this morning? Where are those job cuts coming? What do we know?
So what we know, yes, ASML released a statement at 8:30 CET today saying they would cut as many as 1,700 jobs. That's around 4% of their workforce, and most of those job reductions will take place in the Netherlands, where the bulk of their operations are, but also some in the US. And what ASML said is that these job cuts will primarily be at the leadership level, and they are basically doing this because they've received feedback that the organization is too complex, it needs to be more agile, and so they are reorganizing their technology and their IT business units, and as a result of that, there will be some of these job cuts along the way.
Charlotte, thank you very much. Bloomberg's Charlotte Hughes-Morgan from Amsterdam. Let's head to Paris now. LVMH reporting a drop in sales for a key fashion unit over the holiday season due to sluggish demand. Bloomberg Intelligence says the luxury conglomerate's second-half margin beat doesn't match the consensus optimism for the year. So joining us now, Bloomberg's Angelina Rascouet in Paris. Angelina, what were your key takeaways from this earnings? A tough day to report up against ASML.
Yes, indeed, Anna. I mean, basically, I think analysts were struck by the cautious tone during the conference. Arnault said 2026 will not be a straightforward year, that it's difficult to predict the short term. The fashion and leather goods unit, I mean, there's a lot of hopes right now because there's been quite a few creative changes, but right now it's too soon to tell if Jonathan Anderson will do the trick at Dior because the products are not really available just yet. The bright spot was watches and jewelry, and in particular, Bulgari.
The spirits unit was badly hit as well. Is this a structural? If this is a structural shift in terms of our consumption of alcohol, this is going to be difficult, presumably, for LVMH to turn around.
I mean, wines and spirits, yeah, it really disappointed. In the last quarter, sales fell 9%. That was much worse than expected. It's a tale of two stories, basically. Champagne demand is relatively flat. But cognac, which is really dependent on the US and China, is really suffering. There's a crisis of demand there. In the US, there's a cost of living crisis. People are just not consuming, and they're trading down. So we went to the cognac region last week. We wrote a story for Business Week, and basically producers are trying to adopt drastic measures to reduce the elevated stockpiles of eau de vie, which ends up being cognac, and it's a little bit like OPEC. When OPEC, you know, when prices collapse, they cut production, and cognac producers are basically doing something similar.
Angelina, thank you very much indeed. It's a tough day to be LVMH, tough day to be in the cognac business. The view from Paris. In terms of what we're seeing, the Stoxx 600 is going nowhere this morning.
It's staggering, isn't it? With the AEX up by 1.2%,
yeah,
with the optimism around tech.
So ASML is adding 1.18 points.
Yeah.
LVMH is subtracting 0.49, but there's the sector effect, which is enormous. And luxury is a huge kind of sector story.
It's hardware versus handbags right now. Is that a healthy shift for Europe, longer term?
Yeah. Do we have enough of one and too much of the other? I don't know. Coming up next, we're going to talk about what's happening in AI and the healthcare perspective on the AI story. That's next. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Alex Rodriguez.
And I'm Jason Kelly. And we're back with another season of The Deal with athletes and entrepreneurs who are changing the game on and off the field. Jerry Jones.
1 and 1 is 3 in sports, not 2. And it's because that 3 is imagination. That 3 is putting yourself in a way, having yourself hit the home run.
Erica Ayers-Badon.
I'm a high energy board member. I'm very passionate. I have a lot of opinions.
Up in our zone.
I want to light fires in people's lives. And that is still one of my core mandates for all of my businesses.
Justin Tuck.
I tell all of my friends that play in leagues now, make these relationships now while you're hot. Don't wait till you're like your 12th year in and you just can't get on.
Stay tuned. You won't want to miss it.
It's the world's second largest economy, with a growing influence in global affairs. Bloomberg The China Show brings you the unmatched expertise you need to keep track of breaking news, in-depth market analysis, and the most influential newsmakers in and around China.
We need to do more to engage the market more. We're risk on. I think we caught a little sweet spot.
Massive savings right now.
It's already a different game.
Bloomberg The China Show. Weekdays around the world, right here on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
Technology is embedded in every aspect of our lives.
And laying the foundation for the future.
From finance to defense, AI to entertainment.
And from the road to the stars.
Bloomberg brings you the latest stories of the people and companies pushing the tech sector to new frontiers.
And the politics that shape global tech markets.
I'm Caroline Hyde in New York.
And I'm Ed Ludlow in San Francisco.
Watch Bloomberg Tech every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg Television.
Astonishing day for US technology.
It's shaping the region's technology ecosystem.
Asia's biggest tech news and innovation.
Happy Wednesday. This is the opening trade. We are 30 minutes into today's session. Across the benchmark in Europe, flat. But that is not telling you the story. What is telling you the story is the AEX. What is telling you the story is tech as a sector driving high. That is the biggest gainer. It is handbags versus hardware, and hardware is winning out. LVMH is a drag on the CAC, currently down 0.8%. The DAX is down, gaining 0.1%. There's the softness, though. It's the luxury goods makers. That is the concern on the handbag side, but it's the hardware that's proving strong for Europe. The FTSE 100 here in the UK also benefiting from another pop in gold, up 0.2%. Guy.
It's amazing, isn't it? This is not a top-down market. The top-down story tells you nothing this morning. If you take a look at the Stock 600, take a look at the numbers, doesn't really give you an idea of what is going on because it's an offsetting market. One set of stocks offsetting the other set of stocks. 303 up, 278 down. Weightings matter this morning. Volumes a little on the light side, but not by much. Let's talk about where we're seeing the strength and where we're seeing the weakness. ASML obviously is the big story. The lithography story, the chip equipment maker is having a fantastic morning on the back of its numbers. We've faded a little bit in terms of the early moves. We're up by 5%. Infineon, yes, there's other factors going on this morning, but Infineon is a derivative of that story this morning. The chip space in Europe is having a positive session. Volvo is up by 2.28%. Bit of demand maybe coming through from trucks. Is that a signal that the economy globally is getting better? the shipping story, the logistics story that we see weakness in is now starting to improve. Is that a macro signal we get there? LVMH this week, we know what's happening there. Tom's just talked about what is happening on the handbag front. It's the leather goods that we're seeing weakness in. The pharma space is weak this morning. Roche and Novo are both down. Now, remember, one reports in Swiss francs, the other one reports in dollars. So can I park the dollar effect out of that? What I'm hearing is that maybe actually what we're seeing here is an effect of the renegotiation under the Inflation Reduction Act, Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, and that is what is affecting the pharma space here in Europe. But we're open to answers on a postcard on this one as to why these stocks are down. But remember, different farmers report in different currencies in Europe, and maybe therefore that parks that angle to one side. Anna, what are we watching?
Let's keep the focus on currencies then, Guy. The dollar suffered its deepest one-day drop since last year's tariff rollout after President Trump said he didn't think the currency had weakened excessively. Bloomberg's dollar gauge slid as the comments sapped the appeal of the greenback and US Treasuries, boosting what has become known as the debasement trade. The UK Prime Minister will be accompanied by some of the country's biggest banks and businesses on his visit to China, which starts today. Keir Starmer seems confident he can do what few leaders have shown the political dexterity to pull off. That is broadening trade ties with China without provoking the ire of President Trump. And Tether has quietly become one of the biggest players in the global gold market. The crypto firm's CEO describes the company's role in the gold market as similar to that of a central bank. The company now holds 140 tons of gold, valued at $24 billion, and has been adding 1 to 2 tons a week to its cash. Tom.
Okay, we're talking about tech today, we're talking about healthcare as well, the pharmaceutical stocks in focus. Let's combine the two and talk about a tech startup in the health space in Europe that has been gaining a lot of traction. Sword Health, making acquisitions as it looks to expand its footprint in Europe. The AI health startup, valued at $4 billion, was valued at $4 billion in a 2025 funding round, and is backed by Coda Ventures, General Catalyst, and Founders Fund. We are joined now by the founder and CEO of Sword Health, Virgilio Bento. Virgilio, thanks for your time. Talk to us. Let's start with the acquisition strategy. You're making fresh acquisitions. Talk us through what you're putting the trigger on and why it makes sense.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for having me. So what we are seeing is that there's currently a very rapid adoption of AI in healthcare. And so historically, all the new solutions were launched organically inside Sword. But what we are seeing now is that given the rapid adoption of healthcare, of AI in healthcare, we are accelerating our expansion to acquisitions. And we do that for a couple of reasons. Maybe some new solution that a specific company has. In the specific case of this acquisition, it came down to the network of partnerships, the network of global deployments, and also the book of business that Kaya had, which we thought it was very important for us to accelerate our growth.
Okay, so to be clear, this is a company called Kaya Health that you're acquiring, and you're making that announcement. You're making that announcement today. What does it tell us about your broader M&A strategy, and whether that's core for you, at least for 2026?
So for 2026, we're going to be very active in terms of acquisitions, and this is the first one. We are working in a couple of ones, either in the US and Europe, and so we expect to announce something, a couple of more acquisitions in the first half, and the acquisition strategy really focus on how can we expand into other areas of healthcare, how we can expand to other regions, and so that's pretty much. We've been always very conservative on acquisitions. Now we are being more, I would call it, expansionist when it comes to that playbook.
Virgilia, good morning to you. So Kaya Health, that's the business you're going after this time. Are you going to need to raise more money in order to do that?
No, not for this one. We are indeed raising more money. We are looking to do a $500 million raise in the first quarter. There's pent-up interest from the market for us to do that. That's somewhat connected to the acquisitions to get us some dry powder and some optionality. And we are cash flow positive. We've been cash flow positive in 2025 while growing very, very fast. So we don't have cash needs to support the existing business. It's really about the M&A strategy and the optionality that capital raise will allow us to have. And so, yeah, we are looking to do something in the first quarter in terms of raising money.
Okay, do you know how much you're going to raise in the first quarter? You're saying it's not for this deal, is it for others?
Yes, for future deals, really focused on optionality, and we are looking to raise probably $500 million, around $500 million. Could be a little bit less, could be a little bit more, but that's the quantum that we are looking to raise in the first quarter.
Fee, good morning, it's Guy. Where in the healthcare space is AI going to have the biggest impact?
It's honestly across the spectrum. So when you look at the big applications of AI right now, there are three big applications of AI. Coding is one, search is another one, and the third one is healthcare. And that's why you see OpenAI and Anthropic that are on the epicenter of the AI revolution going after healthcare, right? And that tells you that they see to their data that healthcare is a very, very important use case in healthcare right now. A real use case, I would say, with real value. And so in terms of the applications that we are currently pursuing, we are using AI to treat and heal people if they have pain, if they are anxious, or if they have urinary incontinence. But at the same time, we are also using AI to scale healthcare operations. We announced this partnership with the Greek government where we are taking care of AI triage. So it's really across the spectrum that we are seeing a very rapid adoption of AI in healthcare.
The story this year around AI is people are looking for deliverables. They want to see the productivity improvement. What productivity improvement do you get when you apply AI to those kinds of spaces you've just outlined? How much better is the outcome once you start using AI in the healthcare space?
So in healthcare, there's this paradoxical thing, which is the highest quality of care is actually the cheapest form of care. And what this means is when you are able to provide high quality of care to someone, that patient has their problem fixed, and they don't need to go after wasteful healthcare services. An example of that is someone with physical pain, back pain. They do non-invasive care. They have their problem fixed. They don't need a very expensive surgery down the line. And what AI enables is for people to have access to that high-quality care in the comfort of their homes, in total convenience and as accessible as running water. And what that leads to then is to massive savings for payers, for national health systems, for governments on the cost of healthcare. One data point there is we saved, since our market launch in 2020, we saved our clients more than $1 billion in wasteful healthcare costs. Really additional levels of care that are not needed because AI was able to fix the problem of the patient. And the same thing with AI triage, an example. When people are able to just call a number, talk about the problem, and get recommendations on what to do, get guidance, they don't need to go to the emergency room, which is the more challenging, costly solution to a problem in healthcare. And so we really see not only in terms of quality of care, not only in terms of access, which of course are of paramount importance and the number one thing why we apply AI in healthcare, but then you see these really big impacts on healthcare costs by removing healthcare waste with high quality care. And that's actually the big tailwind behind our growth, not just in the US, but also in Europe, is the fact that AI in healthcare not only drives quality significantly higher, but also, and I'll say equally important, drive costs down. And that both things are very important in healthcare right now, and AI is able to deliver on both.
Virgilio, in terms of you mentioned your partnership with the Greek Health Ministry. Are you?
Yeah.
looking to seal partnerships with other health ministries around Europe? How far are you to looking in those deals if you are? Is the NHS up for grabs here in the UK?
We are doing really good work with the NHS. We have several trusts and ICSs as clients. Really, in the NHS, the problem is really access, right? There's a big waiting list for all types of care, which traditional care models based on human clinicians, given the difference between supply and demand, cannot deliver on. And so AI really has a big impact on removing those or eliminating those waiting lists. And that's the work that we are doing in the UK NHS. More on the component of delivering care across all of our verticals of care. We are now starting to work globally, not just in Europe, but globally with other countries on the AI triage solution, because AI is a very important piece of healthcare because it's the front door. If you get triage right, you get a much healthier healthcare world. And we are seeing that AI can do that much more, I'll call it in a much more scalable and effective way than a labor-intensive model.
Virgilio Bento, founder and CEO of Sword Health, thank you very much indeed on an acquisition and plans to raise maybe up to $500 million in the first quarter of this year. Let's get to the auto space right now and look ahead to earnings. Of course, Mag 7 numbers coming through later today. Tesla amongst the mix, of course, reporting earnings later. Bloomberg Global Autos editor Craig Trudell joins us now. Craig, is this less for Tesla? Is it less about their cars and more about the future prospects of robotics and driverless robo-taxis?
Yeah, I mean, it's a remarkable time for Tesla because I think Elon Musk really is sort of demonstrating how much he has sort of sell-side analysts in the street, like kind of wrapped around his finger, right? His earnings for his company are going in the wrong direction, where everybody thought they were going to be going. It's very dramatic, the sort of reset that we've seen, and yet the stock price has been, quite buoyant, and it's still a very valuable company, in spite of the fact that sales continue to slip, and a lot of questions about, just how much progress he's making on some of those things. The humanoid robots are coming maybe late next year, ready for selling to consumers. And then the quote-unquote robo-taxis, only just recently has he demonstrated an ability for some of those to be going around Austin, Texas, but maybe with trail cars kind of helping them out. So a lot of questions about, what exactly he's doing.
As well.
Yes.
Doesn't sound sustainable.
I really want to know what these robots are going to do for us, but we might have to expand on that conversation. Basically, that's basically what it is. Yes, yes. In my house, this would be helpful. Let me broaden the conversation though, Craig, because I want to talk to you about what's going on with SpaceX. The FT is reporting a possible date for the SpaceX IPO. Now we always talk to you about cars, but these are also vehicles that go somewhere. So what are your thoughts on the dates that we're hearing about here for this? What do we know?
I mean, this is a fascinating report from the FT. The idea that a couple of things are sort of pointed to as reasons for why they're targeting June. One being a couple of planets align then, and Musk is quite fond of puns. He when he acquired Twitter, he famously walked in with the sink and said, "Let that sink in." This one is, if this report is true, the obvious one is, the planets have aligned for SpaceX to go public. I guess the drum tick there after that. And then,
we'll fit in the sound effects.
Yeah, I guess the other factor that FT points to is it's his birthday. And so, who wouldn't want to celebrate their birthday with, taking their company public at an incredibly high valuation and maybe breaking a record for the amount of money raised in an IPO.
That's the world we're in now. It's puns and birthdays, and they tell us
an immense wealth.
Yeah, he could be celebrating as a trillionaire, couldn't he, on this,
Indeed,
if things continue as they've been going. Craig, thank you very much indeed. Looking into Tesla and with the details around that potential SpaceX IPO, of course, our Global Autos editor, Craig Trudell. Coming up, by how much has the UK Technology Secretary said AI can potentially boost economic output by in a single year? The answer when we come back. This is Bloomberg.
tariffs, I think, are probably the first time in my career I've had to deal with like a fundamental change in government policy in terms of how we think about how markets work.
The challenge, especially within my supply chain, is now how do you have enough productivity initiatives to offset the increased cost of all the product?
Can you just move your supply chain out of China and into the US or out of Mexico and up to Canada? Is it that easy?
It's not that easy, but we do have flexibility. And we had been, prior to tariffs, prior to any of this, we had been on a journey to diversify our footprint out of China. So probably 2-ish years ago, roughly 60-65% of our toy and game volume was coming from China. Today, as we entered into 2025, that was around 50%. All we've done is really accelerate the path to get down to roughly, call it 30% by the time we enter into 2027. For us, I mean, if tariffs stay, if tariffs go, it's never good to have so much of your manufacturing base centered on one geography. We think the diversification is good, but it does take a bit of time to get vendors and suppliers up to speed. Quality is a big deal, especially when you're dealing with toys and kids. It's not an instantaneous thing, but it's not also a 5-year, have to build a new plant from scratch.
Making money isn't about drowning in emotions. It's about understanding what's actually happening. Markets are the best way to glean signal from noise, and that is what we try to do every morning. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
Welcome back. Now we're laser focused on AI once again today with ASML and SK Hynix. So before the break, we asked how much has the UK Technology Secretary said that AI can potentially boost economic output here in the UK in a single year. 140 billion pounds. That is the assessment from UK Tech Secretary Liz Kendall, promising, of course, to offer training in AI for all UK workers. In a statement, her department says online courses developed by British industry will be made available to all UK adults. Anyway, aspirational, potentially, but they certainly need the growth, and maybe it comes through from AI productivity.
Why are drug stocks down today? Biopharma stocks under pressure? Let's find out. Sam Fazeli has hot-footed it to set from the Bloomberg, the intelligence side of the building. Why are drug stocks down today?
So I'll give you a few possibilities, right?
Okay.
One is that we had the Inflation Reduction Act list of new drugs for 2028, which will be negotiated by the government in the US. Impacts Medicare. And that shouldn't have been a surprise, but it maybe has reminded people that this drug price pressure is still relevant, even if MFN stories have gone by the by. And on top of that, I think you've got this great story out of ASML. Maybe we've got Take Back. And so, and pharma has performed so well.
Yeah.
Maybe you take some profit
Is that
there.
Take Back or Take Back?
Take back what you need, what
Right.
your cash and put it into take.
Yes.
Take back technology
Okay.
stocks. Yeah.
Excellent. And the other thought we were having this morning was around FX, fast-moving narrative.
Yes.
Is there a rule of thumb you can give us for European pharma what these FX moves mean? Because they're not all the same. They don't all have the same geographical footprint. They don't all report in the same currency. Is there a rule of thumb around FX?
Yeah, well, obviously the ones who report in US dollars, such as Novartis, for instance, they have that direct FX impact. But also, if you think about it, this push for MFN, which supposedly has increased them moving manufacturing to the US, should cushion some of it at some point. But of course, you know, by the time you put your spade in the ground and get the manufacturing going, it's 5 years. So if all your costs have also moved into the US dollar and you're selling in the US, it doesn't matter so much for your impact, but that's going to take some time. So, but generally, you know, FX, weaker dollar is not good for pharma.
Okay, we will watch that, and we'll watch their capex plans as a result. Sam, thank you very much. Sam Fazeli from Bloomberg Intelligence with the latest on that sector. Coming up on today's daybook, so these are the things that we're watching for you today. 10-year auction out of Germany. Prime Minister Starmer in Beijing. That is fairly imminent. He's going to be there really soon. A Canadian rate decision, of course, the Fed rate decision, and plenty of tech earnings. We, Guy, are going to speak to Skyler Montgomery Coney.
Are we?
Yes.
She's here. I
Yes.
probably should. It would be rude not to. You excited about the Fed?
I mean, I was more excited before we got the dollar move yesterday,
Okay.
and that's the more exciting theme. I think certainly something to watch because we do have 4 new voting members as the usual turnover happens in January. We're looking at dissents, we're looking at communication. I think the baseline expectation is that you'll get 2 dissents, so any fewer than that, and it's a hawkish reaction. On communication, the data's been stronger out of the US, and what you've seen as well as Powell's press conferences tend to be a little bit more hawkish, so that could be a boost to yields. And it could be for the dollar, but I think there's much more going on elsewhere that's kind of pulling in the other direction.
She's almost convincing me that I need to stay up tonight.
I still think the press conference is going to be pretty gripping.
I do too, yes, I do too.
This is one of the few people who's actually stood up to President Trump. So we'll see what he has to say, Jay Powell, when he's quizzed on this. Also, if he says anything to support the dollar, and a nod around that, high yields. Scarlett, what are you making of the broader market movements that we're seeing today? And Guy's been pointing out that on a headline basis across the benchmark, we're not seeing much, but there's some really interesting stories at play. Do we start to see more conviction around the AI theme and how that breaks out with the earnings out of the US later today?
I think it's a hard one because what we saw last earnings season, and actually what we've seen repeatedly is that out of the AI stocks and tech more broadly, is that you get earnings that come in very strongly, but you need a really big surprise. And this is generally true across earnings where you need a big surprise for a big market rally, but you need a little downside surprise for a big sell-off. And so that skew means that if you just get okay earnings, if you get a return on investment relative to that capex that's strong, you just kind of toddle along because that's the baseline expectation now. So it means you maintain those valuations. But I think what's more important in markets currently is what's happening from the macro, because you're having such big moves in yields in the dollar, and those are feeding into your equity markets more so than earnings season, I would say, actually.
And speaking of those FX moves, the euro dollar's down by 0.5%, and we've been talking so much about earnings today. Maybe we need to spend a little moment on this story because it has an impact. Martin Kocher of the ECB, Austrian, important, as Tom pointed out to me earlier, talking to other media and saying that there's no need to change interest rates right now. He's comfortable with them right now, but there could be a reason to cut interest rates if the euro keeps moving in the way it does and it weighs on inflation. I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, it's quite a sizable move for something that was quite heavily caveated.
Yes, I mean, the euro problem has been a problem all of last year, right? We already knew this. When you have a very expensive euro, which it is or was relative to rate differentials, and certainly the move that we got yesterday was out of line with fundamentals, as in there's a gap that's opened up between rate differentials now that points to some kind of premium. So that weighs on export competitiveness, which is an issue already for Europe because Germany in particular is competing with China. China's no longer sending as much to the US, so they're competing in the same markets because of tariffs. And you also have the inflation bit come into the picture where you have downside risk to inflation. Now I think, yes, you could have another cut priced in for Europe. That could certainly happen, but I'm not sure that's the determinant of what euro dollar is going to do because of what's actually been driving in the past day, as well as the fact that it's one cut.
The euro is up on a 2-day basis, like a lot. So we had the Trump move, and then we've unwound a little bit on this, and now we're still with 119, 120.
Are we clear on what the pain point is on the earnings front? Is it 122? Is it above that? We've been discussing the numbers in terms of the earnings squeeze for those European companies that have that export function. Whether we get to a point that really has a material impact.
But if you're a US investor, it's fantastic. Put money to work in Europe. It makes it even more attractive.
Shall we have a moment to flag the tech earnings coming
Let's have a moment.
later today? Meta, this is that moment.
Yes, this is that moment. Thanks for the cue. Yes, thank you. Skylar, thank you very much indeed for this in the broader markets. We also have earnings coming up. ASML's done a lot of the heavy lift, of course, in the European session. Then we look ahead to Meta, we look ahead to Tesla, we look ahead to Microsoft, the Azure.
How high is the bar?
It's pretty high, right? You have to continue to convince around the capex, which is paying off for ASML because they're spending.
So
it's paying off for TSMC.
It was hardware versus handbags in the European session. Now we weave in something beginning with H for the US session and those tech earnings. We will work on that by tomorrow.
That's it for the opening trade. The Pulse is up next. This is Bloomberg.
Welcome to the world of decentralized finance.
Why is it that NFTs have not recovered in the same way that, say, Bitcoin has?
Bloomberg is covering all things crypto.
It's a pretty spectacular story.
The people.
This is the future. This is the 21st century economy.
The transactions.
It snapped up nearly $1 billion of Bitcoin.
And the technology.
We need to build a digital Fort Knox.
That gives people financial freedom, and that's a wonderful thing.
That's extraordinary.
We ride the wave that is Bitcoin.
Bloomberg Crypto, Tuesdays only on Bloomberg.
Join me each week on Wall Street Week for stories of capitalism from business, markets, economics, tech, and climate. More than what you need to know, it's what you need to think about.
Middle East and Africa. Vibrant resources and high-yield investment opportunities abound. Join me on Horizons Middle East and Africa for the stories, newsmakers, and insight from this exciting region. Now weekdays, only on Bloomberg.
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Sherrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stradbrook here in Sydney where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news, and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering. We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg Television?
That's a great question.
Very good question.
Interesting question.
Good question.
Great question.
I so appreciate that question. You said they ask interesting questions.
Bloomberg Television. Top experts, great questions.
Good morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Lizzie Burden in London, and these are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. market's close to the overnight session in Asia. We'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
The AI trade is rekindling after ASML smashes expectations, but the Dutch semiconductor equipment giant also says it will cut around 1,700 jobs. The dollar touches its lowest level since 2022 after President Trump suggested he's happy with the decline, saying the greenback is doing great. Plus, the British Prime Minister is the latest world leader set to arrive in China after insisting that Britain does not need to face a choice between Washington or Beijing. So this is the markets that we're looking at. Again, technology stocks seem to be driving most of the global indices after a sharp increase in orders at ASML added to this fresh fuel to the AI trade. Now, the dollar pretty much steady after its worst performance since 2022, posting gains against all major peers. And then, of course, we look at gold because it's above 5,000, currently 5,295. Look, let's also take a look at the European markets map, but I have to say this upbeat mood in stocks also comes ahead of the Fed's latest policy decision, with investors now expecting interest rates to remain on hold at about 225 basis point cuts priced in for 2026. For the conversations that matter and the insights you need, let's get started.
Newsmakers and market movers. This is The Pulse with Francine Lacqua.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to The Pulse. I'm Francine Lacqua here in London. Now, the AI boom is back in the headlines after ASML, the world's top maker of semiconductor equipment, smashed expectations. But first, let's begin with the dollar touching its lowest level since 2022, fueled by President Trump's comments indicating he's comfortable with its recent decline.
No, I think it's great. I mean, the value of the dollar. Look at the business we're doing. No, I'd want it to be just seek its own level, which is the fair thing to do. You could have it. I could have it go up or go down like a yo-yo.
Well, we're now joined by Jennifer McCune, Chief Global Economist at Capital Economics, and Neela Richardson, Economist at ADP. Thank you both for joining us. I'm so excited about the day to come with, expectations of the Fed. I know it's independence. He'll probably push back on that, but also some kind of trajectory. Jennifer, what are you expecting actually to hear from Jay Powell today?
Well, I think probably a really balanced kind of review of the US economy. Obviously, we've had really good data
out of the US economy lately on the activity side, consumers holding up well, that AI investment boom continuing, but also on the inflation side, things seem to be softening a bit, perhaps fewer concerns about inflation. So I don't think we'll see any hints of imminent moves from the Fed. Relatively balanced. Yes, likely some pushback against threats to the Fed's independence, of course, again. Possibly some comment on the dollar as well. It'll be interesting to hear whether Powell stresses any potential inflationary risk or other concerns around the dollar.
Neela, what's your expectation from the Fed? And again, what's your take on dollar? Does it decline further from where we are now? And good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you. Well, in terms of the Fed, the headline numbers, and I agree with the previous comment, are very strong. You look at the unemployment rate, 4.4%, GDP growth out of the third quarter still strong. And what the Fed has commented on lately is productivity growth, which is the elixir to a sticky inflation, has been strong as well. So all the headline numbers are pointing in the right direction. So that is at odds with the dollar weakness that we're seeing. And I think it is also pointing to the direction of the rest of the world being a bit more resilient and having some investment opportunity as well. So the Fed is facing a complex situation, but the headline numbers coming out of the economy are strong. And so that puts them on pretty solid footing.
Neela, several Fed officials have been signaling that rates are now in the right place to shore up unemployment and keep downward pressure on inflation. What are your thoughts on inflation?
I think inflation is going to stay sticky for a while. I think this last mile is going to be hard to get back down to the 2% target. And as evidenced by wages, wage growth has been quite robust, much more robust than we saw during the 2010 to 2019 period, where wages were barely keeping up with the pretty low inflation numbers that we had now. By ADP's measures, wage growth has been, like I said, pretty strong. And so that puts a floor on inflation that wasn't there before. And then you add on other constraints on the economy. It's going to be a challenge getting back to 2%, even though we're going in that direction.
Jennifer, how do you see, again, the U.S. economy performing, also given some of the threats on tariffs and the fact that, there are question marks on inflation, especially where the dollar is?
Yeah, well, the economy, of course, has been really perhaps quite surprisingly resilient to tariffs so far. And what we've seen is that any drag from tariffs has been offset by the fact that, for a start, the revenues have been recycled back into the economy through fiscal policy. And also, you've had this AI boom going on at the same time, which has really helped to shield the economy for any effects. And I think we'll see that continue as long as we don't see any really large tariffs imposed. These threats against Canada, threats against the EU, I think they also pose a threat to the US economy. Assuming that those things don't come through, I think we'll see continued resilience on the tariff side of things so far as the US is concerned, and a continuation of this positive AI story helping to support the economy.
Yeah, we'll get onto AI in a second, but when you look at tariffs, it was very clear at the end of 2025 that a lot of economists, we forgot to speak about tariffs, right? It was kind of like a story of the last 12 months. We got through it, the economy's fine. What did January teach us that they could come back with a vengeance and kind of change the economic dynamics?
One is input costs, especially for small firms and medium-sized firms who are price takers in this market. They can't change their suppliers or their supply chains very easily. And right now it looks like they're absorbing that cost, but that comes with the added cost of maybe a slowdown in hiring, which we've definitely seen in the labor market. The second effect of tariffs has been overall economic uncertainty. And so what we saw at the end of last year is a little more certainty in terms of tariff policy. If that is upset at the beginning of this year, that uncertainty could bleed into decision-making like hiring. So as long as we have a stable policy, I think firms can adjust. When things are uncertain, it's a little harder for them to plan long-term, and we definitely see that play out in the labor market.
And Jennifer, do you see a move away from U.S. assets? It could be dollar, but also treasuries?
No, not greatly. So to some extent, yes. I think we're seeing China, for example, reduce its holdings to some extent. But the question there is really what is the alternative to US assets? And I don't think there's a very strong one at the moment that would really threaten the dollar's position and the position of US assets. Europe, for example, just doesn't have a commonly backed assets on the market right now that could be a serious alternative.
Neva, I want to first of all listen to what the ASML CEO told us this morning, and then I want to ask you about AI. But here's the chief executive.
The last 3 months have brought a lot of clarity. And I think what you see basically is that the semi-industry, our customers, start to believe that this AI demand is sustainable, and therefore they have moved into building capacity, and they are moving very aggressively. And I think this has been very nicely translated indeed into a record booking number. So that's, of course, very good news for the midterm.
Now, you're a labor market specialist, and I read a lot of research saying it will displace a lot of workers, but actually it's a minimal amount and over a longer time than we think. And then you see research where it says, look, 50% of people will lose their jobs in the next 5 years. You've done a lot of research on this. Like, where are we?
Well, if you look at where the U.S. economy is building jobs, it's not in AI exposed sectors. It's in healthcare and leisure and hospitality. And while AI will revolutionize healthcare over the long term, the jobs that are being hired right now are home healthcare aides, nurses, those people-to-people interactions. Same with leisure and hospitality. So what we're seeing in the AI exposed fields is an impact with early career. So you think about the jobs that AI right now is much more relevant to. It's those jobs with tasks that can be easily automated. And those are akin to AI exposed fields like software developers and customer research, customer service analysts in early career. But AI is also augmenting more tenured, more complex jobs. So definitely a split. And when I talk to employers, it's really how to get those early career young people engaged at a time when AI may be actually changing those roles quite significantly.
I mean, you've done an ADP People at Work workforce sentiment, and I was struck by the fact that 85% of workers anticipate AI will affect their job within a few years. I mean, you feel it around you, right? A lot of people ask you, what should my kids study at university? A lot of people say, will my job exist in 3 to 4 years? Does it mean that they're also retraining, or is it going to be problematic for the US in 4 years?
That is the biggest question I get. What should my kid be doing? I always say, if you can go into HVAC, plumbing, or electrician, you're in pretty good stead. But in reality, not everyone is going to do that. And what will be different about our jobs is not our jobs themselves, but our tasks. AI is a very micro tool. It affects what you do on a day-to-day basis, but it may not affect your occupation. And that's a shift in how we think about productivity booms. So what it will require from employers is, as you said, Francine, this upskilling, reskilling, helping workers transition through different tasks. And our work, which we are doing at ADP in connection with Stanford, is figuring out what those high-value tasks will be in an AI future in order to help employers move their workforces in that direction.
And Jennifer, it's amazing. I mean, I was in Davos speaking to the WTO head actually only last week, and she was saying, I mean, the numbers around trade that is really data centers being shipped around is incredible. So how much is AI supporting our economy now?
It really is, and that's definitely a counterpoint to what we're seeing in the labour market, where yes, we're seeing some dislocation, we've seen some job losses, particularly in IT. But on the other hand, it's really boosting demand, it's boosting trade, not just in the US, but in kind of Asian economies that are getting a really significant boost from this AI trade. So long as we're seeing AI boost demand, so long as that continues to happen,
It's leading to improvements in productivity too, which might allow lower interest rates in future because of the downward influence on inflation. That's all positive for the economy. So yes, near-term dislocation in the labour market, but I think if we look to the medium term, this is a positive, and it will create other jobs, as Nila was just saying, around the area. So as long as people can be redeployed in time and that demand boost keeps up, I have a very positive view about the implications for the economy.
No, I mean, this is, we talk a lot about valuations. As an economist, could you see an AI bubble bursting and the Fed needing to step in, or is it something that we need to stress smaller at the moment?
Yeah, there's, I think, two different ways of looking at that, Francine. Is there an investment bubble in the short term? I think that's an open question that markets will decide. There is a lot of infrastructure being built right now. And so there is a secondary evolution of where we are in the AI picture is how to monetize all of this AI investment. That's a separate question to whether or not AI has the potential over the long term to provide productivity and growth and higher standards of living for the world. And I think in the long-term trajectory, AI does have that potential. In the short term, there's likely to be transitions, especially as the infrastructure, data centers, internet networks, the labor required to build this infrastructure is still in transition. So two separate questions, but long-term trajectory is still very solid and positive, not just in the US, but for the world.
Okay, no, thank you so much. It's nice to see you in London. Jennifer McCune, Chief Global Economist at Capital Economics, and Nila Richardson, Economist at ADP. Now, coming up, the French Prime Minister survives another ousting attempt. We'll hear about what this means for his budget next. And this is Bloomberg.
Bringing you up to them in the news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Sherian in Seoul, and this is Bloomberg.
Tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
We gotta talk crypto.
From the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead.
What's the conversation around your company?
Bringing you insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy.
Planning very big things.
A new level of premium.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The floodgates of innovation are going to open up.
You can't fake passion. You either are or you aren't.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily, only on Bloomberg.
Know how the market day started.
Find out how it finishes.
Public markets to private markets.
From the micro to the macro.
Covering retail, entertainment, the business of sports.
The supply chains, trade policy, how it all is impacting the U.S. equity market as we drive to the closing bell at 4 p.m.
A holistic approach to covering financial markets.
If it matters to your life, we're covering it. I'm Katie Greifeld.
And I'm Romaine Bostic, and this is The Close.
Live every weekday.
Only on Bloomberg. Context changes everything.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg.
Well, France is on track to deliver a budget next month after the Prime Minister, Sébastien Lecornu, survived another confidence vote. Well, earlier, the French Finance Minister, Roland Lescure, spoke exclusively to Lizzie about what he believes that outcome means for the budget deficit.
After yesterday's formal adoption by the lower house of the parliament in France, we still have to go to the Senate and back to Parliament, so it'll probably be another week before we have a final adoption. But after yesterday's vote, the spreads between OAT and Bund is smaller than it's been since June 24, which was the snap election. That says something again about the credibility, about the lowering of the political risk premium, and of the fact that we're on track to fiscal consolidation. So there's still a lot of work to be done, but we were on track with what we had planned last year, and we will be this year.
Does that say that the crisis is over?
Stability has got a value, and I think it's being priced in at the moment, and I value that. There's going to be an important election in about 15 months from now, and between now and then, our job is to make sure that there is political stability, that there's fiscal consolidation, so that candidates can then propose French people with hopefully ambitious programs that they can pick from. And in the meantime, we're going to be working to make sure that France is stable, that the G7 works well, and that, France and the world are in a better place. And there's certainly enough uncertainty that there's a lot of work to be done between now and then.
Well, yeah, I'm struggling to imagine how you'll reduce the deficit in 2027 when, as you say, it will be an election year. Will you get rid of the extra tax on big business?
We have a budget this year, 26. That's a budget of stability. As you said, we're lowering the public deficit. We are doing 50-50 expenditure cuts and a bit of tax increases. We're going to have to work on the 27 budget, but give me maybe a week or two to enjoy the fact that we have passed the budget for 26, that we have respected our targets for 25, and that, yes, there's more work to be done, but so far so good, let's admit it.
I know you've maintained a tax on large companies that was meant to be temporary. Is France still pro-business?
It is, and I'm here hopefully to convince your auditors that we still are. We've been the most attractive place in Europe for the past 7 years. Barclays Bank has just announced that they're moving their headquarters to Paris from Dublin, and we want many more. I think fiscal consolidation and political predictability and stability are two important parts of the parameters that people are looking at. When they look at France, we want to streamline procedure. We have a great labor market. We have improved the functioning of the labor market. We have fantastic engineers, traders. AI is on the verge of a big boom in France. You know that France is the place last year where there was the biggest amount of investment in data centers from foreign investors in the world. And that says something about what's going on in France. So again, look through the waves, look at the fundamentals. France is doing better, and we're going to make sure it keeps on doing so.
That was the French Finance Minister Laurent Roland-Lescure. Now, for more on France's budget, Alan Katz, Bloomberg's Paris bureau chief, joins us. Alan, this was a minister on good form, right? He was kind of relieved that they can finally move forward. The spread between French and German debt has narrowed pretty sharply over last week. Does it mean that investors think the French deficit is no longer a problem?
Well, I think he's got a point, Roland-Lescure, when he says that stability has a value. It really has proven to be so over the last 18 months in France, far more than the deficit and what is France's deficit going to be and how big is it going to be. It is the biggest in the euro area, which generally is bad. Bond investors in particular tend not to like that. But they've really shown that, in moments of political instability in France, the spread between French and German debt blows out, and when things start looking better, the spread comes back in. And now it really does look like it's going to be much more stable for some time, and you really see that reflected pretty immediately in bond markets, and that's quite important for France because France has a lot of debt, and so when you have declining interest rates and particularly a declining spread, that makes it easier for France to continue to go out on the market and borrow money and do things it needs to do to keep its budget rolling over the years.
Alan, are there any more no confidence motions to come, and is the Prime Minister's government in any danger of actually being toppled?
So there is at least, or very likely to be, at least a couple more no confidence votes to come. As the minister said, the budget now has to go to the Senate. It'll then come back for one last reading in the National Assembly. They'll pass it again through this process called 49.3, which is this process where they don't actually have a vote on it. That will then spur another couple of no confidence motions, probably. Again, it depends. It's the far left and the far right that have been filing these motions. They will probably file more, and these motions will almost certainly fail again, as they did yesterday and one from about a week earlier. because everyone's really tired of the political instability. And even speaking with both politicians from the far right National Rally and the far left France Unbowed over the last week, speaking to some of these parliamentarians, they've all said they don't expect any of these motions to pass. Le Cornu is probably safe until the next presidential election, really, so into 2027. So it looks like, for the moment, that it really is going to be sort of political stability in France as people gear up really for this big presidential election, which is coming in about 14 months' time.
Alan, are there any other factors that could impact, have an impact on French assets that investors should be looking out for?
There are a few, actually. So one is the municipal elections. They're coming up in March. And again, in and of themselves, they're not super important, particularly not for foreign investors, but even for domestic investors, unless there's a really big trend that comes out of these municipal elections. Say, for example,
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're gonna update this bad boy to Betaflight 4.6, or like the new version is named 2025.12.1. So let's start right into it. Before we can update the flight controller, we need the latest Betaflight configurator. For this, we need a progressive web application for Chrome. I will put the link down in the description. We can also use this application as a standalone application. Now we can connect the quad to Betaflight and do our backup. We got 3 options to do the backup. The first option is to take screenshots from each configuration page and save them separately. The second option is via the presets tab, where we can save our backup. The third version is the classic version via the CLI tab. Via the command dump, we can save the backup. Now we can flash the FC via Betaflight. We use the auto detect function and check if the detected FC is the same.
Over just a little bit more so we can see on the screen. The dampening, we've got point hold to work. All we're going to do is we're going to power up the quad here. We're going to fly off, and we should fly off in a straight line and try not to put much input into it. We want to make sure that the home point icon there that you can see is pointing straight back to me. And in this case, with so many satellites, it's actually doing a really nice job. If I turn around here, you can see that it's facing right back towards me. So what we'll do is we'll fly on up here, and we'll go ahead and we'll hit the position hold, and I'll show you one more quick trick that I figured out. So we'll fly right up here to the camera, and I'll hit the pause button, or the position hold button. Now, one thing that I found is that when you're doing this, that if you put the throttle all the way down, it seems to hold its altitude better. I guess that way it's not getting any input from the transmitter itself there. The only problem with that is when you go to take it out of position and altitude hold, where if I would go ahead and press this button now, the quad will drop straight to the ground. So what I want to do is increase my throttle. So I'm going to increase my throttle, and then I'm going to take it out of position hold, and I'm going to go ahead and fly away here. So as you see, there's really not much to it. The biggest thing is you need to make sure you have a lot of satellites, and then make sure that the home point icon is actually pointing back at you. Then you should just have a successful flight. So let's go ahead and go through the steps to install the software on this actual quad. I actually filmed it before we did this. So let's go ahead and get back in the studio, and I'll show you exactly how I set this quad up. And you saw the result. It's more than acceptable for the first version with position hold and altitude hold. So now we're at the point that we want to install Betaflight 2025.12 onto our quad here. In the past, we've downloaded the Betaflight app and put it onto our device, being a PC. Usually, in most cases, that's what I've always done. Now we actually go to a web page, which is actually app.betaflight.com. I'll put a link to that in the description. You can actually use that for previous versions of Betaflight. Like this one here, I believe has 4.5.1 on it, but we're going to check that here in a second. So we're on the web page now. The first thing we want to do is obviously plug in our quad. We don't need to power it up yet, but we will be powering it up here in just a few minutes to get our channels mapped out for our remote controller. So now we've plugged in the quad to it. If we go, the first time that you go into Betaflight on the web page, you have to tell it which USB port that you're using. Well, of course, you probably don't know what that is. In the upper right here, it says select your device, and I'm just going to say I can't find my USB. Over here on the left, it says that it's a Betaflight flight controller, so I'm going to say connect on that. Now, it's actually connected between the PC and the quad, but not between the flight controller and Betaflight, so I'm just going to click connect over here. As we can see, it's hooked up to our quad. If I move the quad a little bit, you can see on the screen there it moves. And over here, the firmware version is 4.5.1, which is what I thought it was, because pretty much I've updated all my quads that have GPS to that because of the GPS rescue features that were added in 4.5. The next thing that we want to do before we flash the firmware is I do it a little bit differently. I know a lot of people just back up the CLI, which we're certainly going to do that. But I like to do a few screen captures of different things. The ports I usually do, the PIDs and the filters. So it's easier to transfer the data. What I usually do is just dump in the old CLI. When there's warnings, Betaflight will just switch to a default. Then I reference the screen captures, reset my sliders, and then I'm off and running with the new version of Betaflight. It's worked for me. Drop me a comment below and let me know if that's the way you do it, or if there's a reason I shouldn't be doing it this way. But let's just go ahead and do it the way that I've done it on multiple quads and not had a problem. So the first thing that we want to do is we go over to our PID tuning, and I want to do a screen capture of this screen. As you notice, I don't see all of my sliders here. That's because I've never gone in on this computer with this quad, and I need to enable expert mode here. So now I'm going to do a screen capture of this, which I already have from another PC to save time on the video. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to go to my filters and gather that information so I make sure that's correct as well. You may also want to go into your failsafe tab and get any GPS rescue data that you have in there. And it is important when you're doing the position hold and altitude hold to set up GPS rescue, because it actually will use this throttle hover position when it's doing the altitude hold or the initial altitude hold before it takes over auto control. So you might want to save that data to a screen capture as well. The other thing that I would maybe do is maybe your modes tab. If you were doing that, as you can see, it's showing all of the modes, so I'm going to hide the modes here. But anything that you're not comfortable with, just do a screen capture of it. It's better to have more screen captures than not enough screen captures. So enough of that, let's go ahead and we'll flash the firmware. So we're just going to click on Update Firmware over here on the upper right. The first thing that we want to do is we can do an auto detect, but I know from experience we're going to want to say show release candidates, and then here we're going to do release and release candidates. So we're going to do auto detect, and this usually works most of the time nowadays because in the previous version of Betaflight it gave a description of the flight controller and that told it what flight controller it was. And as we can see here, we have 25.12 release candidate 4. That was December 2025, this is December 2025. So the next thing we need to do is we need to configure the software. It actually will configure a specific version for this flight controller online that's a unique version for me and my quad, and it'll be for you and your quad as well. So I'm using the DJI O4 Air Unit Pro, so the radio protocol is going to be S-Bus. The on-screen display is digital, and I don't have any telemetry, and I know the motors are D-shot, so that's correct. We also have GPS here and pin IO, because I removed the VTX because we don't need that. But I do, however, want to add my altitude hold. So I'm going to click on altitude hold, and then I want to do position hold. I want to add those two features, so those are available in the modes tab. So we've got this all set up. Take your time when you're doing this. If you have any questions about what you should do, drop me a comment and I will answer it to the best of my ability. The next thing we want to do is we want to do load firmware online, and this will take a second. So we'll click on that, and as you can see that it actually has done it pretty quick here. So it's success. And then what we want to do is flash the firmware. When we click flash the firmware, it's going to prompt us to save a copy of the CLI automatically, and we didn't do it earlier, so now's a great time to do it. So we're going to do flash firmware, and automatically it comes up with a name here. So I'm going to throw this out on my desktop, and this is from my Vapor X5 flight controller here. So we're going to save that to the desktop. And as you can see down here at the bottom, it's initializing the reboot. It can't find the flight controller, so we're going to tell the bootloader where it's at. So we're going to connect to that. And once you've done this before on your actual PC, it will put it into your cookies and cache, so you have all these settings, so you won't have to do it multiple times. As you can see, it's flashing the firmware now. The process is actually pretty fast here. While the firmware is flashing, if you've made it this far in the video, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that thumbs up button and maybe subscribe for more content like this. Let's go ahead and get back to the install on Betaflight. All right, it says that we successfully loaded Betaflight 2025.12 onto our flight controller. The next thing I want to do is I want to go over to connect here, so we're going to connect to that. And it says, warning, problem with your configuration. Well, that's correct, because there's no configuration in it. First thing that I want to do is I want to check and make sure that it's talking. And of course it is, because I'm moving my quad and it's moving on the screen. The next thing that I'm going to do is immediately just go dump in the CLI from the 4.5.1. And I know it's going to give me error messages, but like I said, if there's an error message, from what I've found out, Betaflight will just go to a default number, and then we can change that number, usually with the sliders or in the GUI itself. So what we're going to do is go to presets here, and I'm going to do load backup. It should take me out to my desktop here, to this configuration file, and we're going to open that, and that's going to put it in. And there it is, and it says, warning, there's configuration problems here. So if we go down, we're going to see that there's several different problems. The GPS rescue throttle position, the number that I had in it before is not a valid number as far as this version of Betaflight. If we go down a little further into it, we'll probably see that the gyro scaling, that may or may not be a function that is available in this version of Betaflight. So at the end of the day, and you can see here the set D minimum pitch to 43, that wasn't available. So I'm going to say save anyway. Now we've gone in, it's rebooting the flight controller. I'm going to connect again. I'm going to go to my PID tuning here, and as you can see, I can't see my slider, so I know that there's been a change in the PID tuning itself. So the way to get the sliders back, if you go over here where we've got the mode, I'm going to do RPY, and we can see that we have our sliders here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to minimize this back a little bit, and I see I have my screen capture of my PIDs here. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and I'll angle this over here to the right. We'll slide it just a little bit more. I love Windows. It never holds the position of this for some reason. And that's my filter settings. We're going to go back to our PIDs. I don't know why I opened that. So we'll get this over here. We'll pull this up here. Now, as we can see on our screen here, as we see the first number here in our PID, let's move this over just a little bit more so we can see on the screen. The dampening, we've got 0.85. The tracking, we've got 0.85, 0.75. Dynamic dampening D should be set to 0.05. And you see that's where one of the error messages were. So I'm just going to move this slider all the way over to 0.05. We've got our wobble at 1.05, 1.25, 1.35, and 1.2. So that all looks good. The next thing that I want to do is I want to click save down here just to make sure I save that. And then I'm going to go to my filters tabs and make sure you always hit save. You can't hit save too many times. So we'll jump out of this screen capture and we'll go to our filters just to verify that. Oh, I'm not seeing my filters on here. Well, we'll check the filters again later on. I thought I had the screen capture on my screen, but I don't. So anyway, long story short, go to your filters tab, make sure that your gyro gain is set.
Changes and the tutorial becomes invalid. But there's two reasons why I am breaking it. Ready? Moment of truth. Pause hold. Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, it's really locked in. Wow, that's better than I expected. That has led me to hold off making a video about this topic. In fact, usually I don't make videos about pre-release versions of Betaflight because I don't want to encourage you to get into something and then, oh, there's a bug, and then maybe it crashes your drone, or God forbid, maybe even creates a safety issue. And then number two, I don't want to make a tutorial about something and then it changes and the tutorial becomes invalid. But there's two reasons why I am breaking that rule today and making this video. And the first is that, okay, Betaflight 4.6 probably has some bugs. They're probably very, very minor. Many people are using it and not having an issue. So if you just take reasonable safety precautions and understand that what you're doing is a little bit more dangerous than just flashing good old Betaflight 4.5 that's been released, then you'll probably be okay. And the other thing is that this is just such an interesting topic, and there's so many people who want to know more about it, and I'm genuinely curious to try it out. And so I just decided today's the day, and as long as I'm going to do it, I may as well make a video for you. So let's get into it. I have to give credit where credit's due. I am working off of this tutorial in the Betaflight wiki. The Betaflight devs put all this work into making documentation, and they should certainly get the credit for that. Some of the things have changed a little bit between when this documentation was written and now, but most of it is up to date, and it's going to be the basis of the work that we do in this video. The first thing that we have to do if we want to take advantage of these features is flash Betaflight 4.6. And since Betaflight 4.6 isn't released yet, we've got to jump through a couple of extra hoops. Now, you can flash Betaflight 4.6 from Betaflight Configurator by enabling expert mode and show release candidates, and then this menu will appear, and if we pick development, we can then choose Betaflight 4.6.0, the latest build. But there's a reason that we shouldn't do this, and the reason is that Betaflight 4.6.0 requires Betaflight Configurator 11.0. A new version of Betaflight requires a new configurator. If you flash Betaflight 4.6.0 and then try to use Configurator 10.10, which is the latest release version, it won't work. It doesn't work right. So how do you get Configurator 11.0? And it is possible to download and install Configurator 11.0, but I don't recommend that you do that. Instead, I recommend that you go to app.betaflight.com, and that is an online version of the configurator that runs in your web browser. You do need to be running certain browsers. This only works with some browsers and not others. I'm pretty sure they need to be like Chromium-based browsers or Chrome. If we go there, that is always the latest version of the configurator, which is a pre-release version. And same disclaimer applies. There could be bugs, caveat, safety precautions apply, but here we've got Configurator 11.0. And in fact, you can even, if you're running Chrome, you can even download this and install it as an app. I've done that runs on your computer. It's a web-based app. So first thing to do, go to app.betaflight.com and run the pre-release version of the Configurator 11.0. That is mandatory. Next, we're going to go to the firmware flasher. We're going to enable expert mode. We're going to show release candidates. We're going to go to development, and we're going to choose our target. Hold on. I have to select device. Let me put the flight controller into DFU mode just by holding down the bootloader button. Now, I can't find my DFU device. There it is, STM32 bootloader. Next, we'll select our target for our flight controller, whatever matches the target that's currently on the flight controller, and we'll select Betaflight 460 Dev as the version we're going to flash. But we're not done yet. You see, Betaflight 460 doesn't come with altitude and position hold enabled by default. So if you just flash 460, you still won't have those features. We're going to go here to the build configuration, and I'm actually surprised that the OSD protocol is not selected by default. So this is an analog bird. I'll select that. You probably want to do the same. And then here in other options, we are going to select position hold, and we are going to select altitude hold. There's one more thing. If your GPS has a compass on it, and you want to use that compass, then you will also need to select magnetometers here. I don't know that for a fact, but I see the compass is a magnetometer, and it seems like if this was not selected, probably your compass wouldn't work, so I would also select that. My GPS doesn't have a compass, so I'm not going to select that. Having done all that, we then are going to load firmware and flash firmware. While that's flashing, you might be a little bit surprised to find out that Betaflight position hold can work without a compass or magnetometer. And it's true that position hold works better if you have a magnetometer, and traditionally firmware like iNav and ArduPilot that do position hold as sort of part of their bread and butter have required a compass in order to do position hold. The reason for that is this. Let's say that I'm trying to do position hold, I'm trying to hold position here, and I detect from my GPS that the drone is sliding this direction. What direction should I tilt the drone in order to counteract that? Should I roll left? Should I pitch forward? Should I pitch back? Should I roll right? You might think the answer is clearly, if I'm sliding this direction, I should roll left in order to compensate. But you're assuming that the drone is facing this direction, right? If I'm facing this direction and I'm sliding this way, I'm sliding the same direction, but now the correct action is to pitch forward. So obviously, I have to know which direction I'm facing in order to correct my position hold deviation. And a compass is the sensor that tells me which direction I'm facing. So how does Betaflight do it without a compass? Well, it turns out that a lot of the time it is safe to assume that the direction you're moving is the direction that you're facing. This is especially true with surface vehicles and airplanes. Basically, an airplane doesn't really move sideways, and it certainly doesn't move backwards. If an airplane is in a crosswind, you'll get a little bit of sideways track, but for the most part, if you know which direction an airplane is moving, you can assume it's facing that direction, and that is how Betaflight treats multirotors. By the way, iNav also added this feature in, I think, iNav 7.00, so this is not like the Betaflight devs invented this, credit where credit's due. The takeaway from this is that Betaflight position hold is going to have some requirements on us. It's not just we're gonna take off and immediately position hold. There are gonna be some requirements, and it's not gonna work quite as well as if we had a compass, but it is gonna let us use this on lots of drones that don't have compasses. We'll get into that a little bit more when we actually take it out and fly it. So now that we've flashed it, let's select our flight controller and connect to our flight controller, and I'm gonna restore my previous configuration from Betaflight 4.5. And I'm gonna do something risky here. I'm just gonna copy paste it in from the previous version, from 4.5 to 4.6. There is potential that some of my 4.5 configuration is incompatible with 4.6, but this isn't a video about that. It would be safer for you to just set it up from scratch, but if you know what you're doing, you can just paste it in and you can look for the errors and correct the errors. This isn't a video about that. Next thing I have to do is go to the Betaflight Modes tab, and I want to find the altitude hold and pause hold modes. And what I'm going to do, I'll add range for those. Oops, that's the wrong aux channel. I want to put it on this switch. And what let's do is let's put altitude hold in the middle position, and then pause hold is going to be the same aux channel in the high position here. That's what I want. So let me say that, and I'll just do hide unused mode so we can see it a little more clearly. What we're going to do is aux 4 is going to be no altitude, no pause hold when the switch is down. In the middle position, we will have altitude hold only, and then in the up position, we will have both altitude hold and pause hold. And it is recommended, it's actually required, I suppose, that you have pause hold and alt hold activated at the same time if you're going to do pause hold. If you did pause hold without alt hold, I guess it would hold its position but not its altitude, and that's probably not what you want. Now, it should go without saying, but you would need to have a GPS configured in order for this to work. It's better also if you have a barometer, but not required. If you don't know how to set up your Betaflight GPS, this isn't going to be the video where we go into it. I'm going to link you to another video I made, Betaflight 4.5 GPS Rescue. This video goes through all the steps of setting up Betaflight GPS Rescue, but at the very beginning of the video, I go into the basic steps of actually getting your GPS working. That's linked in the video description below as well. I'll put a pop out on the corner of the screen if you need to go find that video. I'm going to assume at this point that you have a working GPS, and you're going to also want in the on-screen display to have your basic GPS indicators. Now, I've got more than just the minimum requirement, but what you want is at least the number of satellites, so you can know how many satellites you have locked, and you're going to want your direction home and distance home, because that is going to be key to knowing that the GPS is working correctly. Next, we're going to go to the Betaflight Wiki guide on setting up position hold in Betaflight 4.6. This is documentation created by the Betaflight devs, and it's how we're going to make sure that we haven't missed any important steps. This is linked in the video description below as well if you need to refer to it. So, step 1, include altitude hold and position hold in your firmware build. Ensure your GPS is working properly. We'll do that when we get outside. We'll verify the GPS is working before we even touch this option. Ideally, include a magnetometer and verify that it's working properly. So we do not have a magnetometer, and Betaflight will let us do position hold without a magnetometer, but there is a CLI option. If we scroll down here, where is it? Here we go. Pause hold without mag. There's a CLI option we have to enable in order to tell it to let us do this without a mag. So set, pause, hold, there it is. Pause hold without mag equals on, and let's see, set the hover throttle value accurately. So when you first enable position hold, Betaflight devs and 4.6, this is. Next, we're going to go to the Betaflight Wiki guide on setting up position hold. Yes, and you're going to also want in the on-screen display to have your basic GPS indicators. Now, I've got more than just the minimum requirement, but what you want is at least the number of satellites, so you can know how many satellites you have locked, and you're going to want your direction home and distance home, because that is going to be key to knowing that the GPS is working correctly. Next, we're going to go to the Betaflight Wiki 1. Now, it should go without saying, but you need to have a GPS configured in order for this to work. It's better also if you have a barometer, but not required. If you don't know how to set up your Betaflight GPS, this isn't going to be the video where we go into it. I'm going to link you to another video I made, Betaflight 4.5 GPS Rescue. This video goes through all the steps of setting up Betaflight GPS Rescue, but at the very beginning of the video, I go into the basic steps of actually getting your GPS working. That's linked in the video description below as well. I'll put a pop out on the corner of the screen if you need to go find that video. I'm going to assume at this point that you have a working GPS, and you're going to also want in the on-screen display to have your basic GPS indicators. Now, I've got more than just the minimum requirement, but what you want is at least the number of satellites, so you can know how many satellites you have locked, and you're going to want your direction home and distance home, because that is going to be key to knowing that the GPS is working correctly. Next, we're going to go to the Betaflight Wiki guide on setting up position hold in Betaflight 4.6. This is documentation created by the Betaflight devs, and it's how we're going to make sure that we haven't missed any important steps. This is linked in the video description below as well if you need to refer to it. So, step 1, include altitude hold and position hold in your firmware build. Ensure your GPS is working properly. We'll do that when we get outside. We'll verify the GPS is working before we even touch this option. Ideally, include a magnetometer and verify that it's working properly. So we do not have a magnetometer, and Betaflight will let us do position hold without a magnetometer, but there is a CLI option. If we scroll down here, where is it? Here we go. Pause hold without mag. There's a CLI option we have to enable in order to tell it to let us do this without a mag. So set, pause, hold, there it is. Pause hold without mag equals on, and let's see, set the hover throttle value accurately. So when you first enable position hold, Betaflight doesn't quite have, it's not quite caught up to the drone to manage its altitude. And in fact, whether you're using GPS or a barometer, the altitude data can be a little bit noisy and a little bit laggy. So what you tell Betaflight what your hover throttle value is, and then when you activate position hold, it immediately jumps to that value. So hopefully the drone is neither climbing nor descending, and then the PID loop starts working and it starts maintaining its altitude by raising and lowering the throttle. But it just sort of it keeps it from like suddenly dropping or suddenly climbing when you activate position hold before the PID loop kind of kicks in. So it seems like these parameters have changed since the documentation was written, and this is one consequence of using pre-release features. We've got AP_hover throttle and thr_hover. And I'm not sure which of those is the correct one. Let's just do some quick Googling. What if I do get AP_ and look at all the other AP settings to see what AP means? Yeah, and it looks like AP to me looks like stuff related to position hold. So I see the PID related terms for altitude and PID related terms for position, whereas I'm going to guess that throttle hover is for the throttle expo. Throttle expo also has a hover throttle value, so that's going to be for the rates. That's not what we want. So I'm going to set AP hover_throttle. Let's look at the current value. AP_hover throttle is set to 1275. My drone hovers at about 20% throttle, so that'd be 1200. That's actually pretty close to correct. Set AP hover throttle equals 1200 and save. Okay, 20%, 1200. It goes from 1000 to 2000, so 20% is 1200, 50% would be 1500, and so on. Okay, that's we need to calibrate the accelerometer because the accelerometer is involved in holding the quad flat and level to again sort of provide the initial basis for the PID controller to hold position. So we'll just go here and calibrate accelerometer with the quadcopter flat and level on the ground. Done. And then we're ready to go outside and fly. Before I activate these features, I want to make sure that everything is working correctly. So I am going to first make sure that I have satellites locked. I have 11 satellites locked, so I have a good GPS lock. I should also have altitude in my OSD. I don't. I overlooked that. I'm not going to run back in and do it. But it's a good idea to also just double check that altitude is giving like sane measurements. But we're gonna just wing it. I'm gonna go ahead and take off. And the first thing I'll do is I'll just test angle mode and make sure it is working correctly. All right, and here comes angle mode. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. The next thing I need to do is I need to fly straight for a little while. I don't know the exact distance, but if I don't fly straight for a little while, the GPS heading indicator will not be correct, and I won't be able to use pause hold. You notice right now, my direction home arrow is not facing home. My home direction is more like right here, but it's facing straight this direction, and that is incorrect. So basically, I need to fly in a straight line, maybe further than this field. I need to fly in a straight line until it figures out what my heading is. I'm going to try and just stay over my field because I don't want anything to be crazy. Here it's working better. So I've flown in a straight line for a little while, and now the direction home arrow is pointing in the correct direction. Now we can begin to attempt to fiddle with this feature. So first, I'm going to enable altitude hold. That didn't go well. It just started descending. Let's try again. Altitude hold. No, it is not happy. Maybe I should get my altitude in the OSD after all. Maybe it is screwy. Oh, wait, my hover position isn't right at all. I see the problem. My throttle is not at 20%. It's, I had expo on my throttle. Do you see the throttle indicator in the lower right reading 36%? Previously, when I was on Betaflight 4.5, this quad had some throttle expo on it, and that readout is showing me the actual stick position, not the throttle position that it is mapped to after expo. So I set my hover throttle to 120 to 20%, and it's actually like 36%. I gotta go change that value. That's why it's descending when I switch to altitude hold. Give me one sec. While I'm inside adjusting my flight controller configuration, can I take a second to remind you that I have a Patreon? If you value the kind of content that you're watching right now, the single best way to make sure that I am able to continue making it is to join my Patreon. Patreon is a website where you subscribe to me for as little as $2 a month. That's the minimum amount. You go to Patreon, you put your credit card in, and then you put your PayPal in, whatever, and then you get charged $2 a month. I get some of that, and I have income that I can count on. You get, well, mostly you get to feel good about supporting the work that I do here, and also you get access to my Discord server, which is a pretty awesome, at least the number of satellites, so you can know how many satellites in order for this to work. It's better also if you have a barometer, but not required. If you don't know how to set up your Betaflight GPS, this isn't going to be the video where we go into it. I'm going to link you to another video I made, Betaflight 4.5 GPS Rescue. This video goes through all the steps of setting up Betaflight GPS Rescue, but at the very beginning of the video, I go into the basic steps of actually getting your GPS working. That's linked in the video description below as well. I'll put a pop out on the corner of the screen if you need to go find that video. I'm going to assume at this point that you have a working GPS, and you're going to also want in the on-screen display to have your basic GPS indicators. Now I've got more than just the minimum requirement, but what you want is at least the number of satellites so you can know how many satellites you have locked, and you're going to want your direction home and distance home because that is going to be key to knowing that the GPS is working correctly. Next, we're going to go to the Betaflight Wiki guide on setting up position hold in Betaflight 4.6. This is documentation created by the Betaflight devs, and it's how we're going to make sure that we haven't missed any important steps. This is linked in the video description below as well if you need to refer to it. So, step 1, include altitude hold and position hold in your firmware build. Ensure your GPS is working properly. We'll do that when we get outside. We'll verify the GPS is working before we even touch this option. Ideally, include a magnetometer and verify that it's working properly. So we do not have a magnetometer, and Betaflight will let us do position hold without a magnetometer, but there is a CLI option. If we scroll down here, where is it? Here we go. Pause hold without mag. There's a CLI option we have to enable in order to tell it to let us do this without a mag. So set pause hold, there it is. Pause hold without mag equals on. And let's see, set the hover throttle value accurately. So when you first enable position hold, Betaflight doesn't quite have, it's not quite caught up to the drone to manage its altitude. And in fact, whether you're using GPS or a barometer, the altitude data can be a little bit noisy and a little bit laggy. So what you tell Betaflight what your hover throttle value is, and then when you activate position hold, it immediately jumps to that value. So hopefully the drone is neither climbing nor descending, and then the PID loop starts working and it starts maintaining its altitude by raising and lowering the throttle. But it just sort of gets it keeps it from like suddenly dropping or suddenly climbing when you activate position hold before the PID loop kind of kicks in. So it seems like these parameters have changed since the documentation was written, and this is one consequence of using pre-release features. We've got AP underscore hover throttle and thur underscore hover. And I'm not sure which of those is the correct one. Let's just do some quick Googling. What if I do get AP underscore and look at all the other AP settings to see what AP means? Yeah, and it looks like AP to me looks like stuff related to position hold. So I see the PID related terms for altitude and PID related terms for position, whereas I'm going to guess that throttle hover is for the throttle expo. Throttle expo also has a hover throttle value, so that's going to be for the rates. That's not what we want. So I'm going to set AP hover underscore throttle. Let's look at the current value. AP underscore hover throttle is set to 1275. My drone hovers at about 20% throttle, so that'd be 1200. That's actually pretty close to correct. Set AP Hover throttle equals 1200 and save. Okay, 20%, 1200. It goes from 1000 to 2000, so 20% is 1200, 50% would be 1500, and so on. Okay, that's done. We need to calibrate the accelerometer because it needs to, the accelerometer is involved in holding the quad flat and level to again sort of provide the initial basis for the PID controller to hold position. So we'll just go here and calibrate accelerometer with the quadcopter flat and level on the ground. Done. And then we're ready to go outside and fly. Before I activate these features, I want to make sure that everything is working correctly. So I am going to first make sure that I have satellites locked. I have 11 satellites locked, so I have a good GPS lock. I should also have altitude in my OSD. I don't, I overlooked that, but I'm not gonna run back in and do it. But it's a good idea to also just double check that altitude is giving like sane measurements, but we're gonna just wing it. I'm gonna go ahead and take off. And the first thing I'll do is I'll just test angle mode and make sure it is working correctly. All right, and here comes angle mode. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. The next thing I need to do is I need to fly straight for a little while. I don't know the exact distance, but if I don't fly straight for a little while, the GPS heading indicator will not be correct, and I won't be able to use pause hold. You notice right now, my direction home arrow is not facing home. My home direction is more like right here, but it's facing straight this direction, and that is incorrect. So basically, I need to fly in a straight line, maybe further than this field. I need to fly in a straight line until it figures out what my heading is. I'm going to try and just stay over my field because I don't want anything to be crazy. Here it's working better. So I've flown in a straight line for a little while, and now the direction home arrow is pointing in the correct direction. Now we can begin to attempt to fiddle with this feature. So first, I'm going to enable altitude hold. That didn't go well. It just started descending. Let's try again. Altitude hold.
Yes, sir.
鸡排的话，大家都会很喜欢，因为鸡排是炸鸡，生活长都小孩们肯定会喜欢啊。但是鱼丸汤的话，里面有香菜，这个不太确定他们会不会喜欢。
애들은 절대로 안에 고수가 있다고 얘기하면 안 돼. 큰일 나. 애들은 나 안 먹을래요 이렇게 한단 말이야. 그러면 안 되지. 그럼 먹어 이렇게 하면 안 되잖아. 이게 큰일 나는 거지. 내가 또 한때 잘 나가던 미술 선생님이었어. 미술 선생님으로서 이미 애들을 어떻게 콩트해야 되는지 너무 잘 알지. 내가 뭐 애들을 막 3, 40명 이렇게 키웠어. 내가 그 당시에 내가 그 작은 동네에서 애들을 2, 3, 40...
如果我没有跟他们说有加香菜，结果他们吃了说，哎，怎么会有香菜？然后跑过来生气怎么办？有点担心这一部分。
여기서 잠깐만요. 여기 스파이는 없고요. 두 번째 한 명 여기 한 개. 지파이 한 개. 3번에 한 개. 저기 각각 한 개씩.
지파이 여기 있어. 지파이 누구 시켰지? 이렇게? 맞아? 두 개.
6번에 지파이 두 개.
너 안 시켰어 아무것도?
여기 어묵탕
어묵탕
시켰어.
시켰구나.
좀만 기다려.
하나 남았는데?
하나 남았어. 잠깐만.
여기 한 개. 생각보다
오케이. 지파이 두 개 여기 있어요. 지파이 두 개. 오케이. 이거
뜨거. 그 말했어. 그거 얼마나 크게 찍고 있잖아.
레벨이 하나. 금이잖아. 고맙어.
아니래.
加面，
他们想
想要加面，
鸡肉面吗？
加面，我们有很多面的，
有很多面吗？OK OK。
我觉得很好笑，因为他们想要面，因为很好吃。
哦，已经做完了。
对，大家都想试看看。
不是说小朋友吃不多吗？
对啊，刚刚老师说他们吃不多。
对啊。
为什么平时就是只要吃我们的料理，平时不吃很多的人突然变吃很多？
내 경험상으로는 애들이 좀 그 낯선 음식이다 보니까 먹고 나 못 먹겠어요 라고 할 수도 있기 때문에 그 선생님 입장에서는 그래 일단은 조금 한번 줘보자 라고 생각을 한 거지. 그래서 이제 우리는 딱 적당량만 적당량보다 조금만 담았고 어쨌든 음식은 더 있긴 있었으니까 뭐 문제는 될 게 없었어요. 뭐 맛있게 먹었으니 진짜 다행이지.
怎么说呢？他们吃饭的速度真的超快，我发现他们一直吃，把那个汤都喝完了，然后鸡排也被吃光了，真的很赞。
这就是台湾的味道 ，AKA OK 好吗？谢谢。
比较道地的是要这样上，这样子，你知道吗？对吧？台湾人通常不是这样给吗？
哦，给吗？对，是这样
对啊，
给。
对，是这样给啊。
네, 어묵탕 나왔습니다.
자, 어묵탕.
어묵탕 좀 많이 뜨거우니까 먹을 때 조심해. 네.
이게 완전히 대만식이야, 대만식.
어묵탕 조심해.
조심.
뜨겁다. 어묵탕. 일단 뜨거워.
오케이, 여기는 끝났고.
많이 먹어.
鱼丸汤 아직 많은데.
鱼丸汤.
鱼丸汤소정해 주세요. 마케팅 팀장님.
아, 네. 지금 위안탕 아직 안 나갔나요?
위안탕 3개밖에 안 나갔어요.
오케이. 자,
말이 돼요?
오케이. 그러면 위안탕을.
因为我们还剩很多鱼丸呢。
오케이, 오케이, 오케이.
一整大锅的鱼丸。
오케이. 자, 어묵탕 더 먹고 싶은 사람, 먹어보고 싶은 사람 어묵탕.
要好好的工作啊。
오케이, 한 명, 두 명.
有人要鱼丸汤。
네 명, 다섯, 여섯. 오케이, 오케이.
给我碗，给我碗。
알겠습니다.
给我碗，小龙哥给我碗。
한 10개 정도 줄 수 있어요?
当然。
오케이. 와, 이거 지금 장난 아닌데?
哇，
真的没有开玩笑。
小朋友都吃光光了吗？
吃光光了，他们真的不够。他们都想试试看。
啊？那我们剩下不多嘞，怎么办？应该没有小朋友了吧？
应该不会来，就是最后或者吧。
因为我们也只剩这些，所以我觉得这样刚刚好。
好，那我全部上吧，全部给他们没关系，反正后面不会来小学生。
好。
OK，然后这个我全部上。
没有点的也给他 service 都先给他上，招待。
OK，那全部给哦。
所以你要牛肉面几个？
都给他们没关系，我觉得。
然后先加热一下。
刚刚很多人应该还没吃到。
对。
小心哦，我要开。
OK。我真的一点都没有想到他们这么会喜欢。
对啊，比我们想象的更喜欢呢。因为那个老师们都在帮我们送餐，所以没有什么事情可以做。
我在里面那么忙，然后你们在外面没事情可以做。
那我应该不需要讲那个话。
里面小朋友好像不知道里面有加了香菜，然后他们喝了之后好像还蛮喜欢的。是因为鱼丸太好吃了吗？
내 캣째, 내 경험 많은 선생님이랑 캣째 애들은 고수 없었다고 하는 게 훨씬 나았어. 왜냐면 편견이 있기 때문에 애들이 먹고 나면 무조건 고수 맛이 안 나음에도 불구하고 고수 때문에 못 먹겠어요. 저 집 갈래요. 이렇게 한단 말이야. 내 경험상 그랬어. 그래서 잘된 선택이었지. 어쨌든 애들도 잘 먹었고 그래서 애들한테 모든 재료를 다 줘버렸지.
鱼丸汤比牛肉面卖得更好哎，应该是说鱼丸在韩国算是对小朋友来说比较难接触的感觉吧，所以对他们来说口感也蛮意外，但里面的那个香气也很不错。我觉得鱼丸跟汤配起来很过瘾的感觉。
这就是我的相机，老师们都拿着，帮我拿着拍他们。
好。
OK 了，我先上喽。
先上吧。你可以哦。
可以。 오케이. 자, 먹을 사람 누구 있어요? 같은 사람. 잠깐. 잠깐만 더 많아진 것 같은데 아까보다. 아까 약속한 거랑 좀 다른데 아까 누가 손 안 들었는데. 후반부에 들었어. 내가 후반부에 있었을 때 내가 주방 안에 있었구나. 못 봤구나. 괜찮아 그냥 다 먹어 괜찮아. 알았어 우육면 더 줄게. 우육면 먹고 싶다고? 우육면? 오케이. 우육면 먹고 싶다 잠깐만. 아니 우육면 요구가 너무 많아요 어떡해요?
네, 우육면
면 좀 더
나와요.
끓여주세요.
하고 있습니다. 찌파이는요? 찌파이.
찌파이는 아직 없어요.
아직 많은데.
怎么办？等一下那我先加汤。
예. 너가 나가서.
OK
그 기름이 있어가지고
OK 그럼那
내가 다 넣을게.
这是鸡排是什么？微信上吗？
不是先我们准
可以
备的，
出去的，可以。
但他们不要耶。
他们不要吗
先放旁边就好了，不要离那个。
？OK， 因为他们一直说牛肉面，我先让他们安静一下。鸡排먹을 사람。OK， 여기 먼저 주고 줄게。OK。 你们刚刚听到了吗？听得좋았는데 어떻게? 안 돼. 집가. 너무 어떻게 이래? 애들이 이미 더 먹고 싶어요. 더 주세요. 저도요. 이러고 있는데 어떻게 안 돼? 가 이렇게 할 수 없잖아. 그래서 이제 나도 오랜만에 애들을 보니까 마음이 조금 그렇더라고. 그래서 그냥 다 줬지. 그리고 우리 대만 음식을 이렇게나 좋아해 주는데 이 기회에 좋은 인상이 심어줘야 돼.
对，全部都给小朋友，这样子我们就赶快结束，赶快下班吧。哦耶！
아니 나 선생님한테 한마디 해야겠어. 선생님 방금 애들 별로 많이 안 먹는다 했잖아요. 애들아 걱정마 줄게. 야 찌파이 더 달래.
찌파이 해놓은 거 많아.
응.
先去牛肉面怎么样？
다 우육면 누구? 오케이. 일단 나눠 먹고 있어. 오케이. 여기는 우육 많고 우육면. 오케이. 야, 장난 아닌데? 아니, 진짜 잘 먹는데?
我认真觉得今天的菜真的很好吃，我们做的。
다 먹었어. 이제 갈 거야. 오케이. 알았어. 애들 다 먹었대요. 가기 전에 인사 한번 할까요?
네.
네, 간대요.
많이 먹었어요?
맛있었어.
맛있었어? 뭐가 제일 맛있었어?
뭐 제일 맛있었어?
우육면 괜찮았어?
저기 가래. 오케이. 안녕.
吃的很开心，然后开心的离开，太爽了，太舒服了。
I made it. 오成功了. 와 이렇게 새로운 문화를 받아들이는 게 애들은 진짜로 얘가 이렇게 열려 있구나. 진짜 오픈 마인드구나.
小朋友都吃饱了，食物也都送出去了，那这样子就可以下班啦，耶！哇，老板你看
Oh my god.
肥胖，
哎，真假的？
真的啦。
哎呀，
刚刚在炸那个鸡排的时候啊
Oh my 真的很鸡排。
你也会
真的很鸡排哎 ！Oh my god，我也是没想到会这么多人来，然后真的很鸡排。Oh my 真的很鸡排哎！
你也会
真的很鸡排哎！它真的很鸡排哎！
哎呀，
真的吗 ？Oh my god！
肥胖，
哎，真假的？
真的啦。
哎呀，
刚刚在炸那个鸡排的时候啊
Oh my 真的很鸡排哎！
你也会
真的很鸡排哎 ！Oh my god，我也是没想到会这么多人来，然后而且他们刚刚很积极。
对啊。
他说我要牛肉面，我要鸡排，有没有？
真的。
对啊，他们一直
鱼丸汤，对，
这边没有这样。
那比我想象的反应很好。
对。
对，辛苦了大家。
我以为他们会吃一口，然后就跑出去说太难吃，我不想吃。结果一直我还要牛肉面，我要加面呢。
对。
台湾吗？台湾你可以加面，这里也可以加面吗？
对啊。
韩国也有在加面吗？
加面也有。
也有吗？
也有些
难怪都已经习惯，我要加面这样子。
而且是我刚刚看的时候，他们吃鸡排的时候，哎，这个味道有点
不一样，
不一样哎，这样子，我有点紧张，但是结果吃光了。
对对对，然后那个鱼丸汤我们加了香菜。
对对，有人发现是香菜吗？
没有哎。
好像没有。
他感觉他们可以接受的感觉。
我就说嘛，其实香菜很好吃啊。
对，就吃光了。
对对对。
等一下，怎么了？怎么了？他们应该不会进来吧？
外面有人吗？
不可能吧？
他们有进来吗？
东西都已经卖完了，都已经出去了，只剩鱼丸汤还剩一点点嘛。可是我原本想要留手机。
可是为什么他们感觉要进来？
Oh no！
哇！突然小朋友又都冲进来，但是我们的牛肉面跟鸡排都已经发完了，鱼丸汤是还有剩一点啦。
在那边坐下来，发现一些小朋友开心的走进来，觉得没办法跟他们说我们都卖完了。
영어본인가? 여기 사장님이 다른 학원한테 많이 알렸다고 하긴 했는데 와 이게 생각보다 너무 많이 와가지고 아까 전 팀보다 더 많이 나왔어.
我们食材都用完了哦。
你没有写说到几点吗？
对啊。
几点到几点都没写，这边一整天都可以吃。今晚上12点来也要给他们吃吗？
要不要做单饼？蛋饼，我先单饼是比较简单的吧？
那个皮原本是我要给我朋友的，
皮有吗？
但是我是要给我朋友，我要在韩国的朋友，我要给他的。
那我下次请他吃。那我去买单，
然后做蛋饼。
对，做蛋饼。那我先买单，然后做。
你喜欢吃什么口味？
妻子吧，妻子跟他们在看我呢，等一下。那等，你好，OK， 那我先去买单。
那我赶快去拿蛋饼。
你是要做什么？
我吗？我要干嘛
？OK， 给我去。你好 ，OK， 你
好，快点，是要做30个蛋饼，但是我们却只有2个炉子，因为它不像面，就是一次可以煮一大锅嘛。那好像会花到蛮多时间的，所以需要有人要拖一下时间，不然小朋友会等太久。
내가 방금 카메라에 못 찍었는데 찌파이를 다 나눠줘가지고 애들 안 올 줄 알고. 안녕하세요. 계란 어딨어? 이때. 찌파이 이거 줬으면 안 됐었는데. 이건 되겠지? 그래. 이걸로 계산해주세요. 감사합니다. 지금 맛있는 거야. 애들 주려고. 맛있는 냄새 나죠? 그래서 그쵸. 맛있는 거 진짜 지금 엄청 대단한 거 맛있는 거 하고 있어요. 애들 대만음 씨. 그러니까 애들이라 했는데 이따가 가볼게요. 감사합니다. 땡큐. 제가 지금 급해가지고.
我觉得你需要那个汤匙，你用这个吧。그걸로 하면 계란이 어떨 땐 많고 그래서 나 원래는
是要找要放东西的地方。
아이고 어쩌노.
아이고 애기들이네.
얘들아 어디서 왔어? 밥 먹으러 왔어? 들어 몇 명 왔어? 아이고 진짜 많이 왔네. 기다려 한 명. 들어 앉아 여기 앉으면 돼 여기. 2명, 셋, 넷, 5명. 안녕. 아이고 안녕.
哇，更小的朋友哎， 안녕하세요.
진짜? 피망만 오더니 일부러. 안녕. 아이고 귀여워라. 안녕 얘들아 앉아. 자, 저도 뒤쪽에도 앉아도 돼. 애들 왔습니다. 자, 저쪽 앉아, 저쪽. 앉고.
20个呢。
20位，这么多？天哪！
你们肯定要用2个，不然不行。
큰일 났다.
왜요?
왜?
지금 애들 막 들어왔는데 잠깐만. 애들 엄청 많아요.
几位？
지금 거의 30명 되는 것 같은데? 계란 필요해요?
还要再去买啊？
对，
不够。
OK， 我去买。
蛋饼没有蛋怎么办
？OK。 那你要做30个，需要大概多久呢
？30个，一个一个做，就算我们2个一起，应该也要有个30分钟吧。
30分钟。那我们可不可以？
你不是有那个我们的必杀技？你拿那个出来，然后拖延一点时间，然后我们赶快做。
잠깐만, 내가 못 알아들어? OK， 那先发给他们，那你们可以慢慢做。
对，
不用急啊，
麻烦你了，快交给你了。
얘들아, 여기 집중. 지금 요리 나오려면 조금 시간이 걸려서 그 전에 이게 타이베이 리지라는 과자거든? 이게 대만에서 엄청 맛있는 거야. 그 누가 크래커라고 들어봤어? 대만 누가 크래커?
啊，就已经太热了，所以现在已经可以放了。
알았어. 그러면은 일단 이거를 한 개씩 줄 테니까 한번 먹으면서 기다려줄래? 앞 애들은 아무도 못 먹었어. 이거 너희만 먹는 거야. 우와 대박이지. 알았어. 일단은 자 옆에 있는 애들 돌릴까? 자 이거 한 사람당 이렇게 2개씩 먹으면 돼. 이거 한 사람당 2개씩 이렇게 하면 돼. 자 옆으로 돌려주세요. 알았어 줄게 잠깐만. 자 옆으로 돌려줘. 응. 자 이거는 펑리수. 이거는 그 누가 크래커. 자 얘들 이게 버터로도 만든 거라서 안에 향이 되게 좋고 그리고 이게 수입 버터를 사용한 거거든. 그래서 향이 무지무지하게 좋아. 나도 하나 남아서. 이게 전자레인지에 돌리잖아. 그러면 더 맛있어. 진짜 맛있지.
귀여워. 와사비味冷掉了，我的那个好。
还好有百年品牌的台北梨记，它这次呢也帮我们准备了小朋友的粉，多亏了有台北梨记，丰富了我们这一次提供的选项，然后小朋友也吃得很开心。然后我再煎蛋饼也比较有时间。
그리고 애들이 아까 했던 말이 그 대만에 왔었을 때 또 타이베이 리지를 먹어본 적이 있대. 또 유명한 걸 알고 있더라고. 그래서 그런지 그게 따장 스지엔 아니었으면 진짜 큰일 날 뻔했지. 땀빙 하나하나 해야 되는데. 그리고 대만의 디저트는 이제 실패를 할 수가 없어. 오케이, 现在做了1、2、3、4、5个、6个。OK， 真的幸好他们都是女孩，所以跟男孩有点不一样，不会吃很多了。
对吧？OK，那好，那好。
능력이. 내가 쓸게. 여기서 진짜 여기서.鱼丸汤还好，我们还有鱼丸汤。如果没有它，真的我们
没有汤只有蛋饼。
对啊，只有蛋饼有点尴尬
掉了。鸡蛋好了吗？
好了好了。
这里比较忙还是你的餐厅比较忙？
两个都很忙哦。女孩子们应该会喜欢蛋饼，
而且是不是这边小朋友比刚刚年纪又更小了一点？
对对，更小了。哇，鱼丸汤真的很多哎，我觉得100个小孩也可以吃。
因为你说100个，我就准备很多个啊。小朋友喜欢牛轧饼还是喜欢凤梨酥？
哦，两个都喜欢，都吃光了。
而且我看凤梨酥的口味好像不是只有凤梨的。
对对对，
哇！我好想吃看看，都没有留给我。
对，全部吃光了，刚刚还不够。
原来好看呢。
자 일단 땀빙 나갈게요. 자 나왔습니다. 이게 뭐냐면 치즈랑 옥수수 들어있는 땀빙이라는 거야. 땀빙이라는 음식이거든. 여기 안에 소스도 있어. 근데 살짝 찍어 먹어도 돼. 자 이거는 대만 젓가락이야. 자 일단 이렇게 먹고 있을래? 또 다른 거 줄게. 이거는 땀빙이라는 음식이야. 땀빙.
후에 올려줄게. 이거. 맛있어? 이뻐? 이거 이뻐? 보여줄게. 아 진짜? 고마워. 他说 이쁘다, 然后我说 땀빙 이뻐. 아저씨 이쁘다고요.
애들 먹기 시작했어. 他们开始吃了.
나한테 이쁘다 이래 그러대요. 땀빙 이뻐. 아저씨 이쁘다고요 이래. 없나?
아저씨 이쁘다고?
突然被小孩撩了一下。
애는 그니
他们好像是不是看错？
漂亮。
나 생각 안 하고 얘기했어. 아, 漂亮哦，漂亮，因为她是小女孩，所以她的意思应该是帅吧？对对。
어때요?
他们很喜欢呢。
真的吗？真的有在吃吗？
딴 데가 안 나간 데 있지 않지?
있어요 아직.
우선 하나만 나갔죠?
네. 자, 딴빙 저 나옵니다. 자, 이것도 또 대만 그릇이야, 대만 그릇. 이거 갖다 놓게. 다 먹었어? 잠깐만.
타면 吃得开心吗？
吃得开心，很满意。
오케이.
어, 吃的很香哎。
对啊，喝得出来。
但是很可惜，因为蛋饼有很多种类嘛。
对啊，对
但
啊。
是我们就是只能做西式秘密蛋饼。
嗯。
我是特别喜欢那个 bacon 蛋饼。
bacon 蛋饼。
种类很多嘛，但是我们只能给他们一个口味，我觉得真的很可惜。
嗯，他们吃得开心，所以。아, 아직 안 나는 게 있네.
네네네.
한번 올려드릴게요.
네. 아직 안 된 데가 있었어. 아이고.
나 한남 줄 알았어.
선생님 말씀해 주셔가지고.
그러니까.
오케이. 이거 하고 나서 이렇게 땀빙 다 먹으면 吃完之后我再上那个米碗汤.
好.
이 땀빙이 내가 생각했을 때는 여자애들 입맛이야. 그래서 이제 남자들이 많이 왔으면 고기 없어요? 고기? 나 고기가 좋은데 왜 고기 없어요? 이랬을 거야. 디저트랑 땀빙 이게 딱 여자애들이 좋아하는 건데 진짜 딱 여자애들만 와서 굉장히 운이 좋았어.
这个蛋饼原本是之前也有来过台湾的韩国朋友托我带过来的，但没想到可以派得上用场，真是太好了。然后这次我做的蛋饼是玉米起司蛋饼，然后里面就是有涂一些酱油膏，然后外面有弄一些番茄酱让他们沾着吃。我觉得这是我最喜欢的吃法，还有小朋友也都蛮喜欢的吧。
已经知道他们会喜欢我们的蛋饼，因为我吃一口的时候发现，真的起司的浓度跟蛋饼的组合真的很厉害，我就早就知道他们会喜欢。
자, 지금 땀빙을 하고 있어서 오뎅탕을 먼저 줄게. 이건 대만식 오뎅탕이거든. 보통 이렇게 나와. 숟가락이랑 같이 해가지고. 자, 조심해 뜨거우니까.
땀빙 올려줄게.
고마워.
땀빙.
누나는 21살이에요. 응. 언니는 다 잘해. 언니는 다 잘해. 요리도 잘하고 다 잘해. 그니까 아직 엄마가 안 됐는데 요리를 잘해서 어떡해? 오케이, 내가 그럼 땀빙 자르고 있을게요. 너做的蛋饼做的很漂亮哎。
얘들아 국물 올릴게. 뜨거워. 국물 많이 뜨거워서 조심해.
OK， 蛋饼，然后我要上喽。
好，那是最后一个喽。
啊，最后一个好。
对
OK， 유튜브 조금 더 먹어. 맛있어? 왜? 딱딱한 거는 없어서 좋은데.
귀엽지 않아? 너무 귀여운 반응이었어. 거기다가 앞에 있던 여자 내가 딱 이렇게 눈치를 보더니 야 그럼 내가 먹는다 하더라고. 그러니까 이 여자애는 다 먹고 싶었던 거야. 근데 마침 그 옆에 있는 남자애가 나 이거 싫어요 이러니까 잘됐다 싶은 거지. 그래서 그 여자애는 이제 유한탕이랑 땀빙을 이제 다 먹었어. 전부 다 혼자. 이거 굉장히 운이 좋은 친구야. 오늘 맛있었어요? 얼만큼 맛있었어요? 이만큼! 1000! 오케이. 어떤 게 제일 좋았어요? 땀빙이요? 원래 땀빙이 종류가 진짜 더 많은데 다음번에는 내가 더 많은 종류 해줄게요. 알겠죠? 과정